My Lords, it gives me great pleasure to open this debate to mark International Women's Day, our annual opportunity to pause, to take stock and to reflect on how far women have come in social, economic, cultural and political life, and how far we still have to go. In 1866, a group of women from the Kensington Society organised a petition demanding the same political rights as men. They found 1,499 brave signatories, and their petition was presented to the MPs John Stuart Mill and Henry Fawcett, who supported universal suffrage. Mill agreed to present the petition, and on the 7th of June it was presented to Parliament. Elizabeth Garrett, one of the delegation, arrived early in the Great Hall, clutching a large roll of parchment. Feeling conspicuous, she found the only woman there who seemed to belong, the apple seller, and asked her if she could store the scroll underneath her stand. The apple woman agreed, but insisted that she wanted to sign it too. Mill then added an amendment to the Reform Act asking for women's political equality. His amendment fell by 196 votes to 73. But the ladies of the Kensington Society were not crushed. They set up the London Society for Women's Suffrage. Similar groups sprang up across the country, and in 1887 they joined together to form the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies. My Lords, I must mention Manchester. At the turn of the 19th century, Manchester was a hotbed of radical thinking, social, cultural, political and economic. It was there that the suffragettes Christabel Pankhurst and Annie Kenney were thrown out of a meeting at the Free Trade Hall for daring to ask a question about votes for women. They reacted with typical resilience and held a meeting outside in the street. This led to them being arrested and was the beginning of the campaign for the votes for women. The fight for gender equality was on, and it continues still. 150 years on, the world is a different place. I think the Kensington Society would have been amazed and thrilled at how far we have come. They would see girls outperforming boys at school, outnumbering boys at university, and dominating admissions for medicine. They would be amazed to see women in the boardroom, women in the armed forces, women heads of state, and women in space. None of these advances fell into our laps, of course. Women and male allies have worked doggedly every step of the way, and their work is not over. So tempting though it is to look to the past and pat ourselves on the back, I prefer to use the lessons of history as a spur to action. I am awed at the courage, the vision and the spirit of those who dared to demand the right to be full, equal citizens. The real value of history lies in how it illuminates our path to the future. And International Women's Day is an opportunity for us all to reflect on the future that we are seeking to achieve. So what is our vision for that future? Of course, women across the world face different struggles and have different priorities. Women in the UK are not homogenous. We start from different places and our journeys are not all the same. But we cross the same terrain, and governments of all stripes and in all places can help our passage easier and safer. They can do this through offering us equal opportunity to fulfil our potential, by acting to equalise our life chances, by ensuring that women are able to lead and influence, and by maximising our safety and freedom from harm. It all begins, of course, my lords, with education. It is hard to believe that, in past generations, people genuinely thought that women's brain power was inferior to men's. There are surely very few people who would argue with that now. Within education, the concern is how we can support boys to keep up with the girls. And our concern for girls has shifted from how well they do in school to why their outstripping of boys does not translate into later life career success. Part of the reason I emphasise part is these are multifaceted problems. It is the limits placed by traditional gender roles so that men and women, boys and girls feel pressure to conform to restricted choices and aspirations. This International Women's Day, let's celebrate those women who have blazed a trail into traditionally male spaces, like Roma Agrawal, the structural engineer who worked on the Shard, or the space scientist Maggie Adarin-Pocock. They should not be as remarkable as they are. The government is working to broaden girls' career choices by encouraging more of them to consider careers in STEM sectors. These are the skills our economy needs, the career choices that will narrow the gender pay gap. The STEM workforce is vital to growth and the economy, and our research bases miss out when we're not drawing scientists and engineers from the widest possible pool of talent. So we are funding programmes such as the Stimulating Physics Network and the Further Maths Support Programme, which supports schools and colleges to increase take-up of maths and physics with a particular focus on engaging more girls. Government also supports the Your Life campaign, which aims to transform perceptions of science and maths. Provisional results from 2015 show that the number of girls taking up Maths A-level has increased by 13% over 5 years, and those taking physics rose by 16% over the same period. There are some who believe that there is nothing wrong with men and women occupying separate spheres. That is normal and natural, and we should leave well alone. But that is to ignore the very great benefits of encouraging girls to at least consider a wider range of possible life choices, as well as the benefits to the economy and the simple human justice of allowing people to follow their own talents. There is the fact that what we used to call women's jobs, by and large, pay significantly less than jobs considered the natural territory of men. And this is one of the causes of the gender pay gap. We are very proud that the gender pay gap is narrower than it has ever been, but it still stands at just over 19%, and the Prime Minister has set out this government's ambition to eliminate it in a generation. It's an ambitious aim, but it's one that is essential for empowering women and improving the UK economy. There are, of course, many reasons why there may be a gender pay gap, and the way forward lies in greater transparency so that employers can identify what is going on, employees can ask questions, and consumers can make their own choices. We have published regulations which will increase transparency around the gender pay gap, and we expect employers to start publishing the required information from April 2017. We will be providing a package of support to help businesses calculate, understand and address their gender pay gaps. May I just say at this point how great it is to be here today amongst so many women of distinction. This is still a place dominated by men, but we have the highest ever number of women peers in this place at 210, which is over 1 in 4 of all peers. In the other place there are 191 women MPs, nearly 30% of the total. It is important that women continue to gain positions of leadership and influence. This is not just about parity, but about creating change. Varied life experience makes for richer and more informed decision-making and greater creativity and innovation. We are pleased that the Lord Davis target of 25% of women on the boards of FTSE 100 companies has been met and exceeded. Across the whole FTSE 350, the proportion of women is more than double what it was in 2011. There are no more all-male boards in the FTSE 100 and fewer than 20 left in the FTSE 250. This demonstrates the success of a business-led approach backed by government without the need for legislation or quotas. The work is not over. We will promote the business-led 33% target for FTSE 350 boards by 2020, which was recommended by Lord Davis in his October 2015 report. We are pleased that Sir Philip Hampton, chairman of GlaxoSmithKline, will be chairing a new review, ably supported by his deputy, Dame Helen Alexander. May I finally turn to the difficult and emotive subject of violence against women and girls. My lords, we will not achieve equality for women while 2 are being killed by their partners every week. While they are experiencing sexual harassment on the street, in schools, in workplaces and online, and while they are enduring forced marriages and FGM. It is not just the individual victims who are affected, numerous and important that they are. It is the climate of fear that is created for all women and girls that affects our everyday interaction, our choices and our freedoms. Protecting women and girls from violence and supporting victims is a key priority for this government. We will soon publish a refreshed national strategy on violence against women and girls, which will set out a comprehensive plan of action covering prevention, provision and appropriate services, partnerships to improve multi-agency working and pursuing perpetrators through the criminal justice system. Some of you may have seen our Disrespect Nobody TV ad. This is part of a comprehensive teen relationship abuse campaign that will be launched this month. This follows on from the acclaimed This Is Abuse campaign, which since 2010 has encouraged teens to rethink their views on violence, on consent and on controlling behaviour. We have also made domestic abuse, forced marriage and revenge porn criminal offences, signalling that society is no longer prepared to tolerate these kinds of abuse. We have also introduced new stalking laws, rolled out domestic violence protection orders, strengthened the laws on FGM and set up the Revenge Porn Helpline, which took over 3,000 calls in its first year. I am pleased to note that in the spending review, the Chancellor announced £40 million for domestic abuse services between 2016 and 2020, and a £2 million grant to Women's Aid and Safe Lives to support a new domestic abuse early intervention project. My lords, we have been busy, but the work is still not over. It will never be over so long as women are restricted from contributing their full potential or punished for daring to follow their own path in life to the full. There is much to do, but I draw heart from the fact of how far we have come. Never let us forget that 150 years ago, it is brave and unusual for women to even dare to ask for the vote. Now, as I stand here, I am confident that the vast majority of my peers are firmly in favour of women's equality in all spheres of life. My lords, the hearts and minds of the British people have largely been won in favour of fairness and justice, and it's something to celebrate.
My lords, when John Stuart Mills, in response to the
question is that this motion be agreed to.
Apologies. My lords, when John Stuart Mills, in response to the petition, became the first MP to speak in favour of women's suffrage in 1867, the stereotypes and attitudes he identified as holding back equality, in fact, still prevail today. He challenged those men who believed that politics are not women's business and would distract from their proper duties. He asserted the ordinary occupations of most women and are likely to remain principally domestic. But the notion that these occupations are incompatible with the keenest interest in national affairs is as utterly futile as the apprehension once sincerely entertained that artisans would desert their workshops if they were taught to read. But even in that radical assertion, he acknowledged the persistence of women's proper duties, domestic responsibility and caring for children. Labour's introduction of the welfare state and the social security system improved the lives of millions, but it was supported by an assumption that the man was the breadwinner and the role of married women in work was secondary to their domestic responsibilities, a principle enunciated by Beveridge in his 1942 report. I quote, "The attitude of the housewife to gainful employment outside the home should not be the same as that of a single woman. She has other duties. Taken as a whole, the plan for social security puts a premium on marriage rather than penalising it. In the next 30 years, housewives as mothers have vital work to do in ensuring the adequate continuance of the British race and the British ideals in the world. There was a harmony of view across male-dominated organisations. The TUC General Council commented in 1948 that the home is one of the most important spheres for a woman worker. It would be doing a great injury to the life of the nation if women were persuaded or forced to neglect their domestic duties in order to enter industry. Closing his speech, Stuart Mill asked, "Sir, before it is affirmed that women do not suffer in their interests as women by the denial of the vote, it should be considered whether women have no grievances, whatever the laws and those practices which laws can reach, are in every way as favourable to women as to men." It's to that theme that I turn, and in particular to whether private pension policy is as favourable to women as to men, because all the inequalities that many women face in lower pay, occupational segregation, the carer's penalty and more, are all writ large when they come to retire, and they are too old to mitigate the effects. The state pension was designed originally to provide for women through their husband's entitlement. It didn't cater for women's lives as lower earners and carers. In the mid-1990s, many thousands of women were living in pensioner poverty. Still, 2/3 of pensioners living in relative poverty are women. The reforms to the state pension introduced by the Labour government in 2007 and accelerated by the coalition are designed at last to provide women with a pension in their own right. But there are still inefficiencies. Changes in the labour market mean more women are in mini-jobs, zero and minimum guaranteed hours contracts, and other casualised forms of employment, resulting in significant numbers excluded from building up a state pension. At the heart of the 2010 consensus on private pension reform was the principle that it must work for women. But recent private pension changes appear to have been at best gender blind and at worst discriminate against women. The Coalition's decision to raise the earnings trigger for auto-enrolment into a pension means that many more women are excluded. Of the 10 million workers eligible for automatic enrolment, 38% are women, compared to 62% who are men, under 2 in 5. That reality made the government freeze the earnings trigger until 2017, but hundreds of thousands of women remain excluded. Government policy is focused on incentivising individual saving, but breadwinner attitudes still influence women's behaviour. The pay gap may have narrowed, but women are saving less into their pension pots than men across the income spectrum. Flat rating the state pension increases the importance of the private pension pillar. Whereas the state pension can be adapted in part to reflect carers' needs and in part to reflect national insurance contributions, private pensions, with their closer link between contribution and entitlement, may magnify employment inequalities. Caring is recognised as contributing to the overall economy, so credited with pension entitlement in the state pension system, but not so in the private system. The government consultation on pension tax relief has generated much heat, but consideration of a policy to provide carers credit into private pension pots for periods of family caring, most of which is done by women, attracts no consideration. The Pensions Advisory Service, and I declare an interest as a member of its board, gets nearly 190,000 contacts a year, and it observed that in particular, women face emotional and physical barriers, making it difficult for them to feel empowered to make informed choices and so achieve a good retirement income. What TPAS observes will be confirmed by a new survey to be published tomorrow by the Fawcett Society, which will show the true impact of having children on the way women and men are treated at work. Many employers still believe that women become less committed to their jobs when they have children. Maternity discrimination has increased. The continuing motherhood penalty drives inequality and pushes many women and men into traditional male breadwinner and female carer roles. My Lords, the theme of International Women's Day is the pledge for parity. But without a greater shift in attitudes and more equal sharing of care, we won't achieve equality at work or in retirement. But finally, my Lords, I thank the noble lady Baroness Williams of Trafford for enabling what I believe will be a very rich debate.
My Lords, I too would like to thank the noble lady Baroness Williams for introducing what has now become an annual debate in the Lords to mark International Women's Day. Clearly, huge progress has been made in the United Kingdom since the mid-19th century. Indeed, the franchise is equal, which those in 1866 were seeking. Legislation is in place to seek to guarantee equal rights. That vital foundation for equality, education, is as open to girls as to boys. And yet, it is extraordinarily appropriate that the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Gloucester, who has broken through the church's glass ceiling, has chosen to give her maiden speech in this debate. Yeah. We now have 2 women on the bishop's benches, but let us not forget we have 23 men. There is not one country in the world where there is yet full gender equality between men and women. And I regret that as we mark International Women's Day in this debate, that we are not being international. That said, we have, of course, just agreed in September last year in New York with the rest of the world the Sustainable Development Goals. And the key thing about those SDGs is they apply to every country, not just the poorest, and that includes our own. The SDGs seek to ensure that no one is left behind as we seek to eradicate extreme poverty by 2030. There follows, of course, a particular emphasis on women and girls. That means that this government, for example, like others, must now analyse the impact of policies on both men and women. It has to be part of data analysis. So could the noble lady Baroness Evans, when she replies, tell me which minister in which department is overseeing the implementation across Whitehall of the SDGs in the UK? And is the Treasury now readier than it was when I was a minister to analyse any differential impact of its policies on women? And I would also urge that we continue the coalition's focus on women and girls overseas, on education, on rights, including reproductive rights, on healthcare and on jobs, because what we do there will help to transform lives and economies for the benefit of us all, including here. Clearly, when it comes to our own situation, we can see the progress we have made. My daughter never doubted that she had as great a chance of going to university as did her brothers. But I do not need to go far back in my own family's history to see the divergence between girls and boys. But even if at the age of 22 my daughter stands possessed of her university degree, her future may yet still be different from that of her brothers. In the UK, one of the biggest barriers to equality is that women are still expected to take the largest share of caring, as the noble lady Baroness Drake has just pointed out. And I was hugely struck when I was a minister that the vast majority of my male colleagues had partners and children. The vast majority of my female ministerial colleagues had neither. That is not equality. When we were in government, recognising these challenges, we built on what Labour had done to improve childcare. And my Lib Dem colleague, Jo Swinson, introduced shared parental leave. Recognising that caring not only for children but also for elderly parents or partners falls disproportionately on women, we also sought to improve the position of carers. We are the sandwich generation, as the noble lady Baroness Pitt-Keithley so rightly emphasises. And with huge effort, we brought forward the Dillnot report and then agreed to cap the costs of social care. This government has put that on ice. Are they aware that caring costs and responsibilities fall disproportionately on women? It is through economic independence that women's lives are most likely to be transformed. We still see the gender pay gap, as the noble lady, the minister, mentioned, often largely because women are working in lower paid areas or working part-time because they're also caring for others. And as the EHRC points out, more than 4 decades after the Equal Pay Act, women are still paid almost 20% less than their male co-workers. We need women at every level of the economy and society, which is why we put such effort into supporting the Davis Commission on Women on Boards. And I'm very glad that we're now at 25%, with the threat of quotas underpinning the action taken. But we also need to see this extended and replicated in companies outside this group, as well as, most significantly, amongst chief executives and those lower down the ranks. And we need to see women treated fairly, whatever their level of society. And as the noble lady, the minister, mentioned, that includes recognising and tackling violence against women. Those women fighting for the vote in 1866 were also fighting for women to take their rightful place in Parliament. And there is still more that we need to do to ensure our Parliament is more gender balanced. And I put my hands up here. My party in the Lords has the largest proportion of women, but that is not so for my party in the Commons. When the tide went out for us, we lost so many good MPs. But I'm especially saddened that we lost our women MPs. So I'm very glad to see that one of my colleagues from the Commons is still active in Parliament. Noble Lords can be sure that we are working tirelessly to address this. Now, if their parties can lend us a few safe constituencies, we might find this a little easier. But this is an important point in the year when we take stock of where we are as a society. I look forward to the rest of the debate and especially to the maiden speeches.
Yeah.
My Lords, it's an annual pleasure for me to participate in the International Women's Day debate, and particularly this year to come relatively early in the debate when all the points have not yet been made. My Lords, I thank the noble Lord the Minister for her upbeat opening remarks, and there is indeed much to celebrate. She modestly failed to mention that she missed becoming an MP in 2010 by a mere 92 votes. The House of Commons' loss is definitely the House of Lords' gain. My Lords, I much look forward to both the maiden speech of my noble friend Baroness Mohn, who I know is an inspiration to so many women and girls, both with her own story of success, her encouragement for others, but also with her autobiography and her motivational speaking. How lucky we are in this chamber to be able to hear her at first hand. I congratulate her on her recent report, Be the Boss, on entrepreneurship in disadvantaged communities, and look forward to her contribution to this House and in this chamber in the years ahead. My Lords, the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Gloucester, follows me in this debate, and what a great pleasure it is for us all to welcome her here. I talked this morning to my mother, now 91, who was married by one of her predecessors, C.S. Woodward, in 1952. I expect he would be absolutely astonished to see her sitting here, but I hope he would have been pleased. We very much look forward to hearing her voice today and in the future. My Lords, I made my maiden speech in this same debate 5 years ago. and I make no apology for similar contributions and regular updates on women in politics since then. When Theresa May and I launched Women to Win as a campaign in November 2005, the Conservative Party was at a pretty low ebb. For the second election running, we'd stuck at 9% of the parliamentary party, a miserable 17 women MPs. Over those past 10 years, I'm happy to say that things have improved both within my own party and in Parliament as a whole. I'd like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to all those who've campaigned over the years, including men, and especially my own great-grandfather, Sir Willoughby Dickinson, MP for St Pancras North, an assiduous supporter of women's suffrage, promoting a number of measures in Parliament, including his own women's suffrage bill in 1907. He was motivated by the fact that his sister, a doctor, didn't have the vote. Incomprehensible to him. Watching the suffragette film last year, I imagined him present, as I think he would have been, in that memorable scene when the suffragettes gave evidence in the committee room in the other place. I'm extremely proud of the part he played in the early years of the campaign. Not at all a popular position at the time. Imagine, my lords, how proud he must have felt when his daughter, my grandmother, was elected in 1937, one of a total of 9 women MPs at that time, and then the only Conservative woman elected in 1945 at the general election, and she joined this House as one of a tiny number of women peers in 1962. But enough of ancient history and my personal history. On behalf of all those who believe that this is an important agenda, I would like to thank all the other pioneers who've supported women candidates in the past, including from my own party, my noble friend Baroness Seckham, and even today I meet women who were encouraged by her in the past, and I, for one, look forward to the day when her own granddaughter becomes an MP. Baroness Morris of Bolton played a significant role in for the following generation, as did Baroness Chisholm, who did so much to ensure the election of a record number of Conservative women MPs last May. The missing links are late lamented former colleagues Baroness Miller of Hendon and Baroness Ritchie of Brompton. I hope are looking down at us with smiles of pride on their faces. The Labour Party contributed a seismic shift in this debate with their all-women shortlists, and they too have their own heroes, including Harriet Harman, who deserves considerable credit for her tenacity, the noble lady Baroness Hollis, and of course Baroness Gale, from whom we'll be hearing later. My lords, in last year's debate I felt rather gloomy. I was even fearful that we Conservatives might not improve our female representation. But in the event, the general election was to lead to an unexpectedly high number of women MPs, up across the board to a record 29% of the current House of Commons. This was in thanks, in part, to the Scottish National Party's high percentage of successful women candidates, and there was one of them standing at the bar just now. And also, I'm afraid, following as I am the noble lady Baroness Northover, the fact that we Conservatives gained, I think, 10 women MPs at the cost of the Lib Dem MPs, both male and female. So today we have 68 women Conservative MPs. And I pay tribute to all candidates from all parties who are prepared to step up to the plate. It's not an easy option. So that's over 20%, a significant improvement on the figure I gave of 17 only 10 years ago. And indeed, if we had not achieved that improvement, I, for one, would be campaigning within my party today for some form of affirmative action. But even with this improvement, 20% is not enough. We all need to keep our feet firmly on the accelerator. And I will continue to encourage my party to pledge that no woman MP in my party will be left behind as a result of the forthcoming boundary review. In the past couple of years, new players have joined this field, and I welcome their voices in the debate. Hats off to Frances Scott for her passion for equality and for setting up the 50-50 Parliament campaign. They have highlighted the fact that there are still today in the House of Commons more men than have ever been women MPs. Their petition has been signed by some 50,000 people, and their pressure on keeping the topic on the agenda is welcome. Similarly, I personally welcome the arrival of the Women's Equality Party. My lords, even today some people ask me, so why does it matter? Why does it matter whether it's 9%, 20% of Conservative women MPs? whether it's 29% or less in the House of Commons? Well, in the end, my lords, it's quite simple. It matters because women's life experiences are different to men. They're not inferior and they're not superior, they're just different. And it is that difference which needs to be better reflected across both Houses of Parliament in the future.
This is a maiden speech, my lords, and I would crave your indulgence. So began the maiden speech of Baroness Elliot of Harwood in November 1958, the first female peer to speak in this House. She went on to say, "Except for Her Majesty's gracious opening of Parliament, probably this is the first occasion in 900 years that the voice of a woman has been heard in the deliberations of this House." I cannot make that claim, but it does feel poignant to be participating in this particular debate as the first female bishop to be introduced as a Lord Spiritual. And it is on that note that I want to thank your lordships for your overwhelming warmth of welcome and for the most practical support that I have received from officers and staff. I began professional life in the NHS as a speech and language therapist, and I'm mindful that as soon as I started work, the profession was in the spotlight in the context of the Equal Pay Act. The legal claim was that speech and language therapists, predominantly women, were doing work of equal value to that of male clinical psychologists. That action was eventually settled successfully in the European Court of Justice. My work with children and families as a speech and language therapist fueled my interest in communication, relationship, and connectedness. Together, these are a powerful key to understanding and interpreting what it means to be human and made in the image of God. My call to ordination was not something I welcomed, but I knew that as a follower of Jesus Christ, this was about saying yes to an ongoing journey of becoming the woman I was called to be. In the early 90s, women could not be priests in the Church of England. And so when I went to theological college in Oxford, I never imagined that one day I might be called to be a bishop. Whilst there, it became possible for women to be priested. And when the very first women were ordained priests here in England in 1994, I was actually abroad on a placement in South Africa, just as that country was leading up to its first post-apartheid elections. This was another pivotal time in my desire for all people, irrespective of colour or gender, to fully flourish. And all of this is connected to my abiding interest in conflict resolution and how people stand together in places of difference. In a world of diversity, including gender, conflict will always be part of everyday life, and we need to learn to live it well. What we see across our world is that people are threatened by the other. Over the years, I added my voice to the debate to enable the consecration of women to the episcopate, and my starting point was always the firm conviction that all people are created equal in the image of God and called to use their gifts to the glory of God and for the flourishing of all people. Now, I'm conscious that part of my responsibility in this maiden speech is to give my lordships a snapshot of the diocese in which I serve. Prior to becoming a bishop, I spent my entire ministry in London, latterly in the wonderful boroughs of Hackney, Islington and Tower Hamlets. It was therefore a great surprise and somewhat daunting to be appointed Bishop of Gloucester last year, and extremely humbling to become the first female diocesan bishop. The diocese reaches into counties around Gloucestershire, from Warwickshire in the north and down to Chipping Sodbury in South Gloucestershire. The Forest of Dean forms the western part of the diocese, and to the east the Cotswold Deanery runs into Oxfordshire. in my first 6 months, I've discovered what a wonderfully diverse diocese it is. Urban areas, market towns, rural villages, areas of outstanding natural beauty, and areas crying out for regeneration. There is great affluence and significant poverty. The diocese has a glorious cathedral and almost 400 churches. We have chaplains serving in schools, prisons and hospitals, and many clergy and lay people working together both in traditional and pioneering ways to share the transforming hope and love of Jesus Christ among an ever-growing population. By 2031, it's predicted that there will be over 30,000 new houses in the diocese. It is in this context of the old and the new that the Church is seeking to connect with people's hopes and needs across the diverse range of communities, working alongside other Christian denominations, people of no faith, and people of faiths other than Christian. There are food banks, debt advice centres, work with children and families, youth projects, lunch and breakfast clubs, work with refugees and asylum seekers, and lots of connection with art, music and sport in a part of England which hosts numerous festivals, shows and sporting events. I'm particularly excited by the huge contribution made to human flourishing through the work of 116 church schools, there for everyone. I also want to mention those within the diocese who serve the common good in ways to keep us safe, amongst them NATO's Allied Rapid Reaction Corps and GCHQ in Cheltenham, whose work began at Bletchley Park, where of course 75% of the code-breaking workforce during World War II were women. Whilst most of the famous filming in the diocese has revolved around male characters, including Sherlock Holmes, Father Brown and Harry Potter, I realise that I live in the only county where the Lord Lieutenant, the High Sheriff, the Bishop and the Chief Constable will soon all be women. Something that perhaps seemed impossible in 1866. But International Women's Day is not about gender competition, but gender parity. Women and men, girls and boys, being of equal value and enabled to fulfil their potential. It's for this very reason that I've chosen to spend much of Holy Week in Eastwood Park Women's Prison. And it's the reason that I am committed to supporting the work and campaigns of those who seek to engage with the unequal treatment of women across the world. The Gloucestershire Online Pupil Survey has enabled us to listen to the voice of young people. And it's concerning that over the past 10 years, more young people report not feeling confident about the future, with girls feeling less confident than boys. Such findings are reflected in other national reports, such as those of the Children's Society. International Women's Day reminds us that we have much work yet to do together, to work for the flourishing and valuing of women worldwide, as well as in the UK. Baroness Elliot, in her maiden speech, said that she would try to set a precedent and be short and to the point. In this, I fear I may have failed. But I hope that my words may have enabled us to further take note of the progress made in the UK in the area of women's representation and empowerment. And I thank your lordships once again for your very warm welcome.
My lords, it is a distinct pleasure and privilege to follow the Right Reverend Prelate, the Lord Bishop of Gloucester's maiden speech, which was an historic and excellent speech in every way. I was struck by the history of the Right Reverend Prelate's career prior to ordination, working in the National Health Service as a speech and language therapist. A vitally important role, and I understand during that period of her life, the Right Reverend Prelate developed a deep commitment and concern to ensure that people's voices were heard. And I have no doubt, following what was a quite remarkable maiden speech, that in the years to come, those of Gloucester and more broadly our fellow citizens in this great country will have their voices heard very well and effectively through the contributions of the Right Reverend Prelate in your Lordship's house. My Lords, I would also like to congratulate the Noble Lord the Minister on having secured this important debate. I will confine my contributions to the transformation of the healthcare workforce and the vital role that women in that workforce play both in our own country and globally, but in so doing declare my own interests as Chairman of University College London Partners and my other interests in the Register, and also my fellowship of the Royal College of Surgeons and the Royal College of Physicians. Now, there can be no doubt that one of the greatest achievements of society in the last 150 years is the convergence of men and women in the workplace. And there can be no more important and more dramatic demonstration of that convergence than in the area of health care. If we look back to 1866, the two then senior royal colleges, that of the Royal College of Surgeons and that of the Royal College of Physicians, were some 4 decades away from admitting women members of the college. Today, the President of the Royal College of Surgeons, Claire Marks, and the President of the Royal College of Physicians, Jane Dacre, are both women at the pinnacle of the medical establishment. But it's not only the senior leadership of the profession that reflects greater gender diversity, but it's also the fact that since the 1990s, some 50 to 60% of those entering medical school are women, and that for the first time in 2014, the number of general practitioners, female general practitioners, on the medical register overtook male GPs. Now, that's vitally important because general practice, family, community care is at the very heart of the foundation of the delivery of healthcare in our country through the NHS. These are important advances. Globally, some 75% of the entire healthcare workforce is made up of women. And this is vitally important because governments, both here and abroad, have to understand how most effectively to engage with that diverse workforce if we're going to be able to meet the challenges of increasing demand for health and social care. Now, I'd like to ask Her Majesty's Government what assessment they have made of the changing global demographic in our own country in terms of driving increased demand and the changes in the composition of the workforce and how a workforce to deliver healthcare effectively can be achieved. Now, beyond looking at the composition of the workforce in terms of the skills of healthcare professionals, Labour economists also identify more broadly a very important difference in terms of the priorities and preferences of men and women in the workforce. A Harvard economist, Carol Golding, has looked at this particular question with regard to a segment of the healthcare workforce, those who work as pharmacists. In 1970, some 10% of US pharmacists were women, and they earned only 60% of their male counterparts. As a result of the reorganisation of this very important the area of healthcare delivery, now some 60% of pharmacists in the US are women, and they earn some 92% of their male counterparts. This transformation has been achieved by consolidation, but also the application of information technology to ensure broader participation by different elements of the pharmacy workforce, allowing continuity of care, not focusing on long hours and the stress associated with certain roles, but ensuring that teams can come together using technology to allow different elements who wish to make different contributions to work effectively for patient safety. What assessment has Her Majesty's Government made of the future adoption of information and digital technology in the provision of healthcare to ensure that both male and female members of the healthcare workforce can be most effectively engaged to deliver effective and safe care in our NHS. But finally, a very interesting report published in 2015 by the Centre for Talent Innovation entitled The Power of the Purse identified that in many communities and societies, 59% of women make healthcare decisions for other people. That's not only mothers, because 43% are women working but without children. That's a striking statistic, that they have such a profound impact on taking decisions such as how members of their families and communities are vaccinated, undergo preventative screening, attend medical clinics for health advice. But of those women admitting to having that particular role, taking decisions for others with regard to healthcare, only 38% felt that they were properly informed and educated with regard to being able to take those decisions in a meaningful way. Clearly, there is a greater need to ensure education, of course, for the whole population, but in this particular context, where women might be considered the chief health officer of their families and communities, to ensure that the information is provided in a meaningful and effective way to allow them to take these decisions. And with regard to the NHS, where there is an increasing need to look at public health and preventative medicine strategies, what assessment has Her Majesty's Government made of the opportunity to target women undertaking this type of chief health officer role in their own families and communities to be better informed and educated to achieve our national goal?
Yeah.
My Lords, I first spoke in a debate on International Women's Day in 1993 in the other place, and I want to place on record my pride in the fact that this debate is supported on all sides of the House. 23 years ago, it was greeted with derision from some benches, so at least we've made some progress. And I also want to congratulate the Right Reverend the Bishop of Gloucester on her splendid maiden speech. I'm one of the few members of your Lordship's House who live in her diocese, and I'm proud of the fact. But in the brief time available to me today in this welcome debate, I want to talk about a group of women who are really rarely mentioned in these or any other debates, women in our prisons, and in particular those held in Holloway Prison. The prison was built in 1985, so it's certainly not one of the Victorian prisons, which Michael Gove, the Secretary of State for Justice, has earmarked as unsuitable for modern times. However, it is most certainly the preferred option for London's sentenced women. The findings of the Women's Custodial Estates Review in October 2013 showed that despite the fact that there has been some criticism of the physical design of the prison, I quote, "Holloway must remain as an integral part of the women's estate. It is in a key location to serve courts in London and the South East. Women held there spoke in positive terms about their closeness to families and the ability of their visitors to travel to the prison, which maximises their visits and supports family ties." These conclusions were endorsed as a result of the recent inspection of Holloway by the Chief Inspector, which found that the central location of the prison facilitated women's contact with their family, friends and community, and also commented that there was an impressive range of partner organisations involved in delivering the reducing reoffending pathways. It's important to remember that each year about 17,000 children are affected by their mother's imprisonment. The cost to the public purse in care provision, adoption and fostering, because many of these women do not get their children back, are huge. I first visited Holloway in 1993 and have never forgotten the first time I saw a baby in prison. Her mother had committed an offence for which prison was entirely disproportionate, a common phenomenon in women's prisons. I also made it clear in my report on the vulnerabilities of women in the criminal justice system, the Corstland report, published almost exactly 9 years ago, that we need very few prisons for women, but that we needed a network of women's centres across the country to help these women turn their lives around, become responsible citizens, and become people of whom their children can be proud. I paid tribute to the last Labour government, in particular the then Home Secretary Jack Straw, for providing £15 million to help with the establishment of women's centres, which now number around 50, though one, alas, Alana House in Reading, has closed recently because a community rehabilitation company withdrew funding. This is at the heart of the fact that the women's prison population has gone down from about 4,500 in 2006 to around 3,900 now, although the numbers of women held in prison for the whole of 2014 was 9,041. A team from the Prisons Inspectorate carried out a full inspection of Holloway from the 28th of September to the 8th of October last. This was obviously a huge amount of work by prison staff, as well as in the impressive array of voluntary projects which work alongside staff. The resultant positive debriefing paper left staff feeling upbeat and proud of their endeavours. I was therefore staggered to receive a letter dated 25th November last from Caroline Dinenage, the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Women, Equalities and Family Justice, announcing that the government proposes to close Holloway and relocate the women on remand, 45% of whom do not get a custodial sentence, to HMP Bronzefield, situated near Ashford in Surrey, while sentenced women will be held at Downview, near Sutton, also in Surrey. Women were moved out of Downview a few years ago so as to improve security and make it safer for men. The Minister told me that the Holloway site is to be sold for housing. Now, it's important to remember that in 2010, the National Offender Management Service looked at the potential to close Holloway and sell the site for £40 million plus, no doubt worth a lot more now, but they rejected it because of the impact on families trekking long distances across London to outer locations. No one argued then that sending women to much more inaccessible sites in Surrey was remotely sensible or practical, and the idea was shelved. And then there are the voluntary partner organisations, London-based, about whom the Chief Inspector commented in glowing terms, and who can and do respond regularly to calls for aid at short notice. The Griffin Society has been working in Holloway for years. Women in Prison, of which I'm the patron, sends in staff regularly to work with inmates with a range of activities. Hibiscus Initiatives works with foreign national women. These are often the unfortunates referred to as drug mules, but now there are also women who've been trafficked. Hibiscus can assist with foreign language translation and advocacy, possible in a multicultural conurbation like London. There won't be too much of that in Surrey. These women also appreciate the diversity among staff in Holloway, which also reflects the location of the prison. Foreign national women were also held in Downview some years ago, and they hated it. These organisations do valuable work with the nearly 75% of women in our prisons who have mental health problems, many of which are severe. The last time I was in Holloway, a Chinese woman was in there. She was hysterical. She would not stop screaming. She only spoke Mandarin. Hibiscus found a woman who spoke Mandarin in London, and it turned out that she thought she was going to be summarily shot. She had been trafficked to this country to sell pirate CDs and DVDs, and it was possible, given the location of that prison, that her mind could be set at rest. Holloway is nothing like the prison from which the noble Lord Ramsbottom stormed out of in disgust when he was the Chief Inspector. And, my lords, the National Offender Management Service should know better than this. If the government had announced that Holloway was to close and that the site used for social housing, but not before a small women's prison and preferably 2 women's centres were opened in different parts of London, I would hang out the flags. In the absence of such a commitment, I remain implacably opposed to this wrong-headed policy.
My lords, as a wee girl, I grew up in a tenement flat in the East End of Glasgow, with no bath or shower and only a cupboard for a bedroom. And so I can't begin to explain what an honour it is to be making my maiden speech in your lordship's house today. And it is an honour to be making my speech alongside the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Gloucester, and congratulate her on a brilliant and historic maiden speech. My lords, I wondered if I would fit in here, but I shouldn't have worried. I am endlessly grateful for the guidance and support from all the officers and everyone who works in this wonderful house. and for the kindness and warmth of welcome from members of all sides. I would particularly like to thank my two sponsors, my noble friends, the Lord Freud and Baroness Morris of Bolton. To Baroness Morris, a huge thank you for being the best mentor I could ever have wished for, gently correcting me when I get things wrong. I'd also like to thank Baroness Williams and the Chief Whip for finding time for this important debate. My Lords, I am dyslexic, and this speech is harder than any business I've ever started. And I started my first business when I was 10 years old. I had a paper round, and by the time I was 11, I had 17 teenagers working for me. Then at the age of 12, I got a job in the local fruit and veg shop, but I was soon headhunted by the sweetie shop across the road, who paid me 15 pence more an hour, so I can tell your lordships, I was off like a shot. My parents didn't have an easy life. My brother died when he was a baby, and my dad was confined to a wheelchair at the age of 38. So at the age of 15, I decided to leave school and go to work. I had nothing except passion, determination, and a can-do attitude. I didn't realise it at the time, but those are the basic ingredients required to be an entrepreneur. At the age of 24, after years of working for others, getting married and having children, I decided to go it alone. I went to see the incredible Prince's Trust, who gave me help that I needed to start up my business. I started in my bedroom and, against all the odds, turned it into a successful global brand. Innovation was always crucial to its success, and I sold the company last year to spread my wings and satisfy my entrepreneurial spirit. So I was honoured and truly touched when the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Ian Duncan-Smith, asked me to head a review on a subject really close to my heart: boosting start-up businesses in deprived areas. My team and I travelled across the country, from John O'Groats to Land's End, speaking to hundreds of people and over 70 organisations. I found that the greatest barriers for start-ups are not just a lack of capital or expertise, but the loneliness and lack of confidence and poor access to support networks. These barriers are experienced mostly by women, and although I feel it's the best it's ever been since I started my business, we still have a long way to go. Just 20% of SMEs are led by women, and as a working mum of 3, I know how hard it can be. Being an entrepreneur can be the loneliest job in the world, and that's why being part of network, support and mentoring is vital. I was lucky that my mum and dad taught me dreams can come true. If you work hard, be honest and never ever give up. They worked round the clock to give us a better life. My fantastic kids, Rebecca, Declan and Bethany, have put up with an entrepreneurial mum, but their support and encouraged me every single day. I would like to thank them all for the part that they have played in my success, that many people are not so fortunate. Today is 140 years to the date since another Scot, Alexander Graham Bell, patented a device that revolutionised the world we communicate in, the likes of which the world had never seen before. We need to think big, just like Graham Bell did, and find new ways to improve communication and networking for those who need it most. If we were to utilise the skills of all the women currently out of work in the UK, it is predicted we would see economic benefits of between £15 and £21 billion per year. That's more than the total value of all UK exports to China. The first part of my report was published last week, and I am delighted to say that we are already seeing progress. With one of the world's leading banks, HSBC, committing to provide hubs to support startups in deprived areas. I will be looking to the government to make progress on implementing my other recommendations for the good of start-up businesses in this country. This country is a fantastic place to start a business. However, far too often we focus on the doom and gloom, when a positive mental attitude is needed for success. I want to see a future where women and girls, as well as men and boys, from even the most deprived areas, dream of starting their own business. And I am committed to ensuring each and every one of them has an equal chance to succeed. I want them to believe that it doesn't matter where you're from. If you have a dream, determination, and a can-do attitude, and access to support, you will succeed. The greatest gift we can offer is inspiration. I love music, and I would like to share with you the words of a song by the late, great Whitney Houston, which inspired me when I was growing up. I normally sing this at karaoke, but on the advice of our wonderful doorkeepers, I thought I would spare your lordship's ears. I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. My lords, I am devoted to helping achieve our goals for the people of this country. I look forward to playing a full and active role in your lordship's house, and to join with all members on all sides to inspire and support the next generation of entrepreneurs, promote the role and importance of women, and to ensure that every single young person in the United Kingdom have the opportunity, support, pride and belief they need to succeed, wherever they are from and whatever their circumstances are. Thank you.
My lords, such a pity that the noble lady didn't burst into song, but there we are. It is a great pleasure to follow her and to congratulate her on her maiden speech, which was, by any standards, quite outstanding, and I do say that quite sincerely. Looking the noble lady up on Google, I noticed that she already had a notable political success. It was a beaming picture of her between Ian Duncan Smith and George Osborne. It was a picture of happy unity. She had brought them together. There are not many who can say that just now. Her next challenge is a photograph with Boris and David Cameron. More seriously, my lords, she made an admirable speech based on her own experience and struggles, and an entrepreneurship which seems to have gone back an incredibly long way into her childhood. It, if I may say so, stands as an encouragement for so many young people in this country. And as far as this House is concerned, we all very much look forward to her next contributions. My lords, if I may, I could also congratulate the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Gloucester, for her outstanding speech as well. The first woman bishop to speak in this House. My noble friend has already paid her tribute, and my only question, having listened to her, would be, why has it all taken so long for a woman bishop to get here? My lords, this debate has ranged wide, and quite rightly, much has concentrated on those things that have been achieved. But in so many ways, the position of women has been transformed. I would just like to make briefly a plea for one group of women, and it will come as no surprise to Noble Lord Cashman, who have not been empowered and even less have political influence. And these are women with HIV. It is one of the strange features of the debate on HIV and AIDS that so often, I would say almost always, the discussion is in terms of men having sex with men, the rights of gay men, and of course this is vastly important. Around the world, gay men are discriminated against and so often the subject of violence and contempt. But in our concern for them, we should not forget the equally real plight of women. We should remember that over half of those living with HIV around the world today are women. That means that globally there are around 17 to 18 million women living with HIV, and we should remember that over the last 10 years we have had something like 4 million AIDS-related deaths. We should remember the impact that this has had on the hundreds of thousands of children who inherit the virus. Half the children living with HIV die before their second birthday if they do not receive treatment, and disgracefully only a third of children do receive such treatment. And we should remember also that although the position is undeniably worse in many countries overseas, notably in sub-Saharan Africa, that does not mean that in some strange way Britain is exempt. Here, over 35,000 women are living with HIV. In particular, there is a major problem among the black African community. Of course, this is not remotely a general problem, but you cannot evade the truth that women in the black African population pose a particular challenge, not least because of the fear they have that if their position becomes known, they will be subject to discrimination. For the truth is that irrespective of country, the public attitude to women with HIV is often very similar. They encounter stigma and violence wherever they turn, and not just in Africa. I remember being in India, looking at the position there. Women were blamed when it was quite clear that the infection had been transmitted by the man. But that did not prevent women being blamed, ostracised, forced to leave their homes and living a lonely life as widows in big cities, all because they had contracted a virus which was not infected and could be easily treated. And nor should we believe that in Britain the same stigma does not apply. A study at Homerton University Hospital in East London showed that almost half of the women with HIV had suffered some form of violence, predominantly from a partner. While as for stigma, Professor Jane Anderson, who does such enormously good work in this area, says that stigma is quite simply a huge issue. I was encouraged by what the Minister, the Noble Lady Baroness Williams of Trafford, said about violence, and I hope that in any paper that comes forward, in any proposals that come forward, women with HIV will be noted in that. And this wall of stigma has one overwhelming impact. It means that many, many women are reluctant to come forward for testing, fearing that the result could publicly leak into their community. When eventually they do come forward, it is either late, making treatment more difficult, or it is too late. That is the bleak and largely hidden problem we face. And so what can we do in this country to tackle those issues? First, the position of women with HIV has to rise further up the agenda. It means we in this country trying to take a lead even when we are not directly affected. For example, I believe that all efforts should be directed at ending the criminalisation of homosexuality, for it has a direct read across on the position of women generally, not just gay women. For where governments have such laws, they make an explicit statement that prejudice, discrimination and stigma are all to be tolerated. And I would hope, if I may say so, and I was encouraged to hear the Bishop's comments on this, I hope that the churches may take a really leading role in this. And in this country, what can we do directly? My hope has always been, ever since I entered this field 30 years ago this year, that Britain could lead the world. For a time, I think that we did. But I think that at the moment, it would be a brave man who said that we are doing so today. Where I believe we could make a distinctive contribution is in prevention, a point which has already been made, preventing women becoming affected in the first place. HIV is a virus and it should be treated like any other ailment or disease. But if we are going to have good public health policies, then we need to have the resources to go behind them. My Lords, I make one last point. We have talked today of discrimination that prevented for so long women having even basic rights. As we celebrate the advances that have been made, we should remember this. Discrimination does not fit into neat, totally separate boxes. The boxes connect, as our experience with HIV shows, when the discrimination against men directly affects the position of women. In a debate like this, we should remember also the mountains that there are still to climb, and that women's empowerment still has a very long way to go.
My Lords, it is always an honour and a pleasure to follow the noble Lord Fowler when he eloquently, once again, gives a voice to the voiceless and gives an image to those who otherwise would remain invisible. Can I also congratulate Baroness Mohn on her excellent maiden speech and the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Gloucester. Interestingly, we share something in common. Baroness Mohn, you were born in the East End of Glasgow. I was born in the East End of London, where my first job was actually working in a shop at the age of 7, standing on a beer crate so I could actually see the customers on the other side. Unlike you, I didn't work my way up in the business field. And of course, the Right Reverend Prelate also worked and saw the beauty of the East End and its amazing people. So congratulations on your maiden speeches, and congratulations too to Baroness Williams for once again securing this debate and opening it with your usual, if I may say, brilliance and your commitment to equality. It's always wonderful to see you at the dispatch box, defending equality across the board, brooking no prejudice. But, my Lords, today I want to actually widen the debate slightly further, because for me, the national is international and international is national. And therefore, in the context of today's debate, I want to refer to the World Economic Forum report on the global gender gap of 2015, which I believe, my Lords, has many echoes for us here in the United Kingdom and represents the barriers to representation and the empowerment of women. Its main findings, my Lords, with regards to the gender gap between men and women internationally are as follows, and I'll be brief. Despite an additional 250 million women entering the global workforce since 2006, wage inequality persists, with women only now earning what men earned a decade ago. The global gender gap across health, education, economic opportunity and politics has closed by only 4% in the past 10 years. In education, is education failing women? My Lords, I would say yes. The gap has widened in 22% of surveyed countries since 2006, and while more women, as we've heard from the Noble Minister, the men are enrolling at universities, in this case in 97 countries, women make up the majority of skilled workers in only 68 countries, and the majority of leaders in only 4. Political empowerment, the fourth pillar measured by the index, is the widest. Worldwide, only 23% of this gender gap has been closed. Although this area has seen actually the most improvement, up 9% from 14% in 2006. Yet sadly, Only 2 countries have reached parity in Parliament, and only 4 have reached parity on ministerial roles. Let me now turn to the United Kingdom. The figures in the library document are interesting indeed, and we've heard that 29% of MPs are now women, the highest, but nowhere near the 50% parity that we need to achieve in local government. 32% of local authority councillors are women. Again, not enough. So, we're doing well, but my lords, it's clear that we need to do more. It's clear to me that central to empowerment and greater education, greater representation, is education. And tackling the issues which prevent or dissuade women, particularly raising aspirational levels, addressing the key issues of lifelong learning, and role models are key, especially across the different age groups, different educational levels too. Not all of us reached where we are today by following the same route or the same educational route. I'm reinforcing, my lords, ability, talent, aspiration, common and unique to us all, as well as that sense of purpose and duty. Yet, despite some progress, far too many women are trapped in low-paid work or not in employment at all, and often by virtue of birth and to whom they're born and where they're born, they are dissuaded, actively dissuaded from breaking out of the stereotype imposed on them. I look at my own mother who, because she was a woman, had to follow her mother who had been an office cleaner. And if my mother had had daughters instead of sons, they would have gone into factories like her and her sisters, or into office cleaning. Watching my mother do all-night office cleaning, then early morning cleaning, come home, get her children off to school, rest, do the housework, then go off to early office cleaning. And looking at her through years and years of carrying heavy shopping, shoulders rounded and hunched. Never once was it thought, because of where she was born and to whom she was born, that she could have had a different life. And I want to pay tribute, therefore, my lords, to the trade union movement and others who were pivotal in championing the rights of women and their empowerment, and are still doing so today. Each day as I walk through St Stephen's Hall, I look at the statue of the first Viscount Falkland, and I see a physical reminder of the fight for women's universal suffrage, the repaired sword and the broken spur, where Marjorie Symes in 1909 chained herself in the fight for votes for women, for universal suffrage. And women are empowered too when they feel safe. Much vital work is being done in this regard by Safe Gigs for Women campaign. It sounds like a joke, but my lords, it's not. Making venues and festivals safe for women that others so often take for granted. And the He for She campaign being rolled out today by Barclays, being rolled out internationally, which brings men into the campaign for equality, remembering that only together can we all advance. And we must recognise, as Lord Fowler said, that there are still barriers to women achieving. Barriers based on a multiplicity of discrimination, with each ground of discrimination compounding the other. Discrimination on the grounds of race, ethnicity, religion, belief, age, disability, sexual orientation or gender identity, and trans women face almost insurmountable barriers and discrimination across the spectrum. And as Norman Fowler said, the Lord Fowler said, women living with HIV too must never be forgotten. But my lords, the situation internationally, as I said earlier, affects us here too. Women refugees, the mothers of refugees, driven almost insane by the need to protect their families. I see them crammed into boats or their faces pressed against razor wire fences in the Western Balkans. I see them queuing for food, water, medicine. And I look at the human race and what we have become, and I hang my head in shame. My lords, we must never barter away the rights of another in order to protect our own, because as soon as we do, we diminish our own rights and we gain nothing. We can look up and say we have done well for women and girls in our society, and in some other parts of the world too. But we cannot yet hold our heads high when we see civilization behaving in such a self-obsessed and protectionist way. So, my lords, much done, much proudly done, but so much more to do.
My Lords, it's an absolute pleasure to take part in today's debate and to listen to the excellent speeches of the Right Reverend Prelate, Bishop of Gloucester, and the Noble Baroness Mohn. And I too have things in common with them. I was raised in a religious household, albeit of a different variety from that of the Noble Baroness, the Right Reverend Prelate. And I also worked in a greengrocer's when I was at school. Indeed, there was a time when I could perfectly weigh a pound of vegetables in my hand. And like them, I imagine that I never in my natural thought that I would end up as a member of your Lordship's house. That I did is owed in part to visionary people like John Stuart Mill and like Beveridge, who believed in women's place in society and did what they could to encourage our involvement in it. And I very much look forward to working with the Noble Baronesses to make sure that now that we're here, lots of other women benefit as we did from such efforts. The Noble Baroness, the Lady Williams, started off in 1866. I have to go one better than that and say that in 1865, Elizabeth Garrett Anderson qualified as the first female doctor in this country after some considerable application to do so. And in 1872, she managed to open the first hospital for women and children. Flick forward, my lords, to last December 2015, when the Chief Medical Officer issued her report, The Health of the 51% Women's Health. And, my lords, I want to talk about the one group of people who get one mention only, and that's the LBT women. We got one mention, and that was in relation to violence. Well, domestic violence is an issue in our community. Let's not run away from that. And I do thank the government for their recent support, financial support, for Broken Rainbow, the charity that deals with that. Is that our biggest presenting issue to the National Health Service? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. We have lots of large-scale studies that show that lesbian and bisexual and trans women are much more likely to have long-standing health conditions, and that we are particularly at risk on things such as known public health risk factors such as smoking and drinking. We have a significant percentage of women who have sex with women who do contract STIs, but there is very, very little information that is made available to people, to women, to know how to protect themselves. We even have practitioners health practitioners who wrongly think that lesbians are not entitled to have some of the screening that other women do. And that is dangerous. And we also know in our community that there's very, very little information at all for us on matters to do with cancer, which are, why should we be considered to be wholly different from other women when in fact that's as big an issue for us as it is for anybody else. And also we know that when lesbians get older, they are much more likely to be alone. In 2004, Stonewall's report, Unhealthy Attitudes, explained to us a bit about why this happened. They surveyed 3,000 health and social care staff. 24% of staff had heard colleagues make negative remarks about people. 57% of NHS staff didn't think that a person's sexuality had any bearing on their health whatsoever. And 72% of patient-facing staff had never ever been given any training whatsoever. And I have to tell you, my lords, a bit of personal experience I'm happy to share. When you're called in for some of the routine screening that happens, and the person who's engaged with you sits there and says, well, what about contraception? And you say, well, I don't need it. And they say, well, at your age, you might think you don't, but perhaps you do. And when you sit there and say, no, I really, really don't need this, the dynamic and the trust disappears completely. It's a terrible situation in which women go to their health providers and just feel that they don't have any confidence that they will be treated correctly and with respect. The Noble Lord Cashman made reference to the report of the Women and Equalities Committee, groundbreaking report, I would say, from earlier on this year that did talk about trans women's health. We know that there's a particular problem in that we don't have enough surgeons at the moment to meet the demand from women who need to have surgery, their mental health, apart from their physical health. But more than that, we don't have staff at primary care level who have been through the training and who can deal with those women as they would other people. It was interesting to sit and listen to people giving evidence to the committee about how they'd gone in with common health complaints and been referred to the gender identity clinic, as though the gender identity service knew what to do about respiratory illness or whatever, and completely and utterly inappropriate. My lords, the National Health Service is a great institution, and I don't want to run it down, but I do think that those of us who are taxpayers and who are LGBT women have a right to deserve better, just to deserve to get what everybody else does. Following the publication of a number of these reports, including the Unhealthy Attitudes survey, NHS England did run some round tables, and they did acknowledge that particularly monitoring of patients and workforce, ensuring that there is much greater attention paid to the health and social care needs of LGBT women should be met, not least under the Equality Act public sector equality duty. So I'd like to ask the Noble Baroness, the Minister, what steps that the NHS has taken to implement their recommendations in their the LGBT action plan, and what are their plans for next year? How will they ensure that we are included in that? And in the findings of the Women and Equalities Transgender Report, what is the Department of Health and NHS England going to do about the admittedly dire situation of provision for those women? My lords, medical pioneers like Elizabeth Garrett Anderson realised something important. It's only when we live in communities which understand our needs as individuals and that we have institutions that bring us together on the basis of our similarity and not trading on our differences, that we become a successful economy and a successful society. I would ask the Minister, in the spirit of International Women's Day, to consider my questions and to give us some answers.
My Lords, I too would like to congratulate the Right Reverend Prelate to the Bishop of Gloucester and the Noble Baroness Moan for their brilliant speeches. They are both obviously women of ability, talent, and great communicators, and I look forward to hearing them more. My Lords, on the last occasion when I spoke in this debate, I started the debate by saying I was going to tell a story of HeLa cells, and that HeLa cells were cancer cells. And after I'd gone along this line for about 2 minutes, I was getting looks of amazement, and clearly the Noble Baroness is particularly feeling that I lost the plot. So I intend to continue in the same vein today, for I begin by telling a story of photograph 51. Photograph 51 is an X-ray diffraction image of DNA, which contributed to the discovery of DNA and the now famous double helix model created by Watson and Crick, and for which Watson, Crick, and Wilkins were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in 1962. I can see the same look coming on your faces now, so I better come clean. My Lords, the Noble Baroness Williams in her introduction mentioned the contributions that women make to social, economic, cultural, and political life at the highest level. May I add to that the contribution that women make to science. This will be the century of the science. We will see more discoveries in all fields of science that will contribute to our wealth and well-being. Photograph 51, my Lords, was taken by Rosalind Franklin, a chemist who had graduated from Newnham College, Cambridge, gained a PhD in 1945. In 1951, she was using X-ray crystallography to develop molecular structure of DNA as a research associate at King's College London under the supervision of Maurice Wilkins, who was considered rather a disagreeable man. 2 years later, she would leave King's College because of her disagreements to work at Birkbeck College, where she did research on viruses, including tobacco mosaic viruses. One of her team members then was Aaron Klug, who later was awarded a Nobel Prize for his work on viruses in 1982. Rosalind Franklin died in 1958 at the age of 37 of ovarian cancer, still a very nasty disease. Controversy has always surrounded about not only her contribution for discovery of DNA, but why she was not awarded a Nobel Prize, together with Watson, Crick, and Wilkins. She may also have got a second Nobel Prize, and hence joined the only woman, Marie Curie, to have awarded 2 Nobel Prizes, jointly with Sir Aaron Krug. But she hadn't lived long enough, and Nobel Prizes are not awarded posthumously. She also worked, surprisingly, with Richard Norrish, who was awarded Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 1967. That relationship apparently was not happy either. In the United Kingdom, only 4 women since 1901 have been awarded Nobel Prizes. 2, Betty Williams and Mariette Corrigan, were awarded the Peace Prize for initiating peace in Northern Ireland in 1976. 1 Nobel Prize was awarded in 2007 to Doris Lessing, at the age of 88 years and 58 days, the oldest person to have been awarded a Nobel Prize. Her novels are very commonly known, particularly The Grass is Singing, and she wrote 50 other novels. She was followed by MI5 and MI6 because of her communist leanings. She fought for equality and apartheid, which she had seen in southern Rhodesia as it then was. And her Nobel oration, which was titled Not Winning the Nobel Prize, which was later produced in manuscript and limited edition for supporting children with HIV and AIDS. The 4th Nobel Prize, and the only one in science so far awarded to a woman in the United Kingdom, was awarded in 1964 to Dorothy Crawford Hodgkins, known commonly as Dorothy Hodgkins. At the age of 10, she was interested in chemistry and crystals. She gained first-class honors, the only 3rd woman to do so, at Somerville in Oxford. And using crystallography and X-ray crystallography, she discovered the structure of vitamin B12, insulin, and penicillin. Crippled from the early age of 24, she worked and researched all her years in a wheelchair. She's the only 2nd woman to have been awarded Order of Merit in 1965, the first woman being Florence Nightingale. The fact that very few women in science are recognized has to be at the highest level, has to be a concern, for we have some of the most brilliant women scientists. Even today, the first woman president of the Royal Society of Edinburgh, which I am a fellow, the society that was founded in 1783, the first woman president appointed last year is Jocelyn Bell Burnell. She did physics in Glasgow and PhD in Cambridge. At a young age, she was interested in astronomy. And as a postgraduate student, she contributed and operated an 1.5 megahertz radio telescope. In 1969, analyzing miles of printouts of data from radio telescope, she noted that there were few unusual signals, and later determined that these signals may have emerged from superdense, rapidly spinning collapsed stars, now known as pulsars. Her supervisor, Anthony Hughes, and Martin Ryle were awarded a Nobel Prize in Physics in 1974, but Jocelyn Burnell was not, despite the fact she was the 2nd author on the paper. Of course, it is not good if top women scientists do not get the recognition they deserve. Things are changing. While the Royal Society, founded in 1660, has yet to have a woman president, Last year, they elected 11 women of the 58 new fellows. And the Academy of Medical Sciences in 2015 had 35% of the new fellows are women. For the economic success and welfare of our country, we need people who do STEM subjects. Only 12.8% of STEM workforce is women, despite the fact that women at school get top grades. Most of them, unfortunately, go in medicine, but they might choose other subjects if they were given other branches of professions if they were given a chance. Only 17% of STEM professors are women. We need to promote more women in STEM subjects and greater recognition of women in science. The pledge to parity should equally apply to women in science.
My Lords, I would like to begin by congratulating the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Gloucester, on her excellent maiden speech and how good it sounds to say her maiden speech. And also huge congratulations to my noble friend Baroness Mohn for a maiden speech that encapsulated her warmth, her sense of humour and her no-nonsense, down-to-earth attitude. She was enormously kind about me, but I have to tell your lordships that the pleasure is all mine, although I do take some pride in the fact that my noble friend now calls the Royal Gallery by its real name and not that big cold room. My noble friend is a breath of fresh air, an asset to these benches and to your lordship's house. My lords, women have always worked for the well-being of their families and so contributed enormously to the economy. But I was surprised to find that women's employment rates were as high in 1851 as they were in 1971, roughly 43%. A fact I came across thanks to Noor Abdul-Haq from Oxford Spires Academy, who spent last week with me on work experience and thoroughly enjoyed her time looking up statistics for this debate. But whilst the numbers of women working might have been similar for much of the past 150 years, the difference in the quality of employment, the status of women in the workplace and women's representation is light years ahead. And I too would like to thank my noble friend the Minister for giving us a chance to reflect and note these significant changes. Later this year, it will be 15 years since my right honourable friend Ian Duncan Smith asked me to become Vice Chairman of the party with responsibility for candidates. Working closely with my noble friends Baroness Shepherd of Northwold and Lord Taylor of Holbeach, we were charged with making the Conservative Party look more like the country it aspired to represent. And that meant we needed more women. Because whatever your views on all-women shortlists, the 101 Labour women MPs elected at the 1997 general election literally changed the face of British politics forever. We were enormously successful in finding really talented women candidates. We just weren't successful at winning the 2005 general election, and all our efforts yielded only 17 women MPs. Most went on to be elected in 2010 and 2015, many now serving as ministers and in the cabinet, and others, and I look at our front bench, have come to your lordship's house and serve as ministers. But it takes a long time to change a culture, and it takes endless patience, preparation, and above all, support. And I would like to pay an enormous tribute to my noble friend Baroness Jenkin of Kennington, whose unstinting work with Women to Win, the organisation set up in 2005 by her and by my right honourable friend Theresa May, and by men and women to encourage more women to get involved in politics. And we saw the number of Conservative women MPs increase, as we've heard, in 10 years from 17 to 68. That isn't just good for the Conservative Party, it's good for Great Britain. My Lords, the progress of women in the United Kingdom cannot be debated in isolation. It's a big world out there, and we have much to learn from one another. So although today's debate concentrates on the United Kingdom, I'm sure my noble friend, the ministers, won't mind if on the eve of International Women's Day I mention my beloved Middle East. I had to be the first one to break rank and go international, and I declare my interests as set out in the register. There are a lot of misconceptions about the role of women in the Middle East, and sadly we heard some of them voiced in your Lordship's house a couple of weeks ago. It is far too easy to trot out the stereotypes when the truth is somewhat different. Women's suffrage has varied in the Middle East and North Africa. It began in mandated British Palestine in 1946, and now across the region women can vote and stand for office. Last month, the United Arab Emirates announced the appointment of 8 women ministers, and women sit in the Shura Council in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. In a report in 2012 on women's empowerment in the region, the George W. Bush Presidential Centre confirmed that the Middle East is crowded with highly accomplished, strong and determined women. We see this in the wonderful ambassadors who serve in the UK, currently from Morocco and Lebanon, and previously from Bahrain, Jordan and Tunisia. And we see it in inspiring businesswomen like Rasha Al-Rumi, who runs Kuwait Airways, and Randa Ayubi from Jordan, the founder of Rubicon, and a man-based entertainment company who was recently named one of the 25 most influential women in global television. And in Kuwait, there are now more women than men graduating in science and engineering. Sciences Po in France are currently conducting research into why that might be. Perhaps, my lords, we could learn something from the research. These women, and countless more like them, live in countries where society is often more conservative than their leadership, and which, relatively speaking, are still at the beginning of their journey towards the full empowerment of women. My lords, we must do all that we can, whenever we can, to support and acknowledge their achievements, because they will be the role models and the drivers of change in the future.
Yeah. Congratulations to the Right Reverend Prelate and the Noble Baroness for their excellent and inspiring speeches. I welcome this debate on women's representation and empowerment, as it allows me to raise the plight of women who are homeless and sleeping rough and therefore far from being empowered. Homelessness for both men and women is a growing national problem. The government recently released figures showing that 3,569 people slept rough on any one night across England in 2015, an increase of 30% from 274 in 2014, and a wholly unacceptable increase of 102% between 2010 and 2015. Homeless women are at increased risk of attack and exploitation. St Mungo's, the homeless charity, to whom I thank for briefing me, say 28% of their clients are women, of whom 78% have a mental health need, 52% have a substance use problem of drugs or alcohol, 4 out of 10 have an offending history, and 24% have been in prison. Nearly half have slept rough, and half have experienced domestic violence, 30% of whom say this fact contributed to their homelessness. 1 in 5 experience childhood violence or abuse. The combined homelessness and information network recorded 1,094 women sleeping rough in London in 2014-15. Although information about the gender of people sleeping rough is not publicly available outside London, 30% of people using homeless accommodation services in England are women, according to Homeless Link. These figures are likely to be an underestimate, as women say that they take care to hide themselves when sleeping rough, and therefore difficult to find for official counts. Many more women will be hidden homeless, living outside mainstream homelessness accommodation. Instead, they may be sofa surfing, staying with family or friends, or trapped in abusive relationships because they have nowhere else to go. Others, according to St Mungo's, will be squatting or living in crack houses or engaged in prostitution. Better data collection is needed to help plan appropriate, gender-sensitive accommodation and services. National and local government in future should collect and report data on gender as part of annual street counts. Of particular concern are the number of women rough sleepers with mental health problems. In London, the figure is thought to be 60%. Women are more likely to sleep rough as a result of traumatic experiences, including violence and abuse. And those with mental health problems spend longer sleeping rough, which in turn makes it harder to access mental health services. They struggle to escape the street because mental health problems make it harder for them to engage with homelessness services. Professional outreach workers also suggest that depression and post-traumatic stress disorder can contribute to a lack of motivation and sense of hopelessness, which prevents women tackling their situation, unable to persist with appointments and paperwork. Stigma plays a part, together with a lack of services that will work with people facing multiple problems, including drug and alcohol use, difficulties getting an assessment or referral to secondary care without being registered with the GP, and trouble making and keeping appointments while sleeping on the street. In London, the number of people recorded as sleeping rough with an identified mental health support need has more than tripled over the last 5 years. Patients discharged from mental health hospitals should not be left to fend for themselves on the streets with nowhere to sleep. And too often, vulnerable women are released from prison with no accommodation to go to. I acknowledge that this government has provided £6.5 billion to help vulnerable people through housing-related support, and in addition given over £500 million since 2010 to local authorities and the voluntary sector to prevent and tackle homelessness and rough sleeping. But more needs to be done. St Mungo's is calling on the government to publish a new, ambitious national rough sleeping strategy. This should include an investment in specialist homelessness mental health services. The new strategy should deliver mental health assessments and professional support to people on the street, specialist supported housing to help with their recovery, and the right support upon discharge so people do not end up sleeping rough after leaving mental health hospitals. Supported housing must include women-only hostels and refuges, which can provide the holistic, gender-sensitive support that allows women to move out of homelessness. Significant cuts to local authority spending on housing-related support have resulted in a reduction of such services. St Mungo's believes that the future of supported housing for vulnerable groups is increasingly uncertain, and though welcoming the decision to suspend the rent reduction for supported housing for 1 year while the review into this specialist type of housing is completed, it remains concerned. The government proposals to cap housing benefit at the local housing allowance rate, now also suspended by a year, is still due to apply to tenancies from 2017, and this will leave St Mungo's facing an enormous shortfall in income for specialist housing, leading to possible closure of this support. It is essential that accommodation and support is available for homeless women with substance use and mental health issues, and those involved in prostitution who are less able to access traditional refuge services. Early intervention is vital, as so many problems that lead to women's homelessness have been found to begin in childhood. The Troubled Families Programme must identify girls and women who are at risk and need support to avoid homelessness. St Mungo's report, Rebuilding Shattered Lives, found that women's homelessness often occurred after prolonged experience of trauma, including physical, sexual and emotional abuse, frequently within the home. This led to a cycle of mental ill health and substance use and a myriad of other interrelated challenges to overcome, including the loss of their children being taken into care. My Lords, in order to empower these vulnerable women, the government must take further action in partnership with local government and the voluntary sector to end rough sleeping.
Let me start by congratulating the Right Reverend Bishop of Gloucester, first female bishop in this house, and to Baroness Moore on their brilliant and interesting speeches. My Lords, I thank the noble lady, Baroness Williams of Trafford, for securing this important debate to assess the progress made since the petition of 1866 to increase women's representation and empowerment. It is common knowledge that progress has been slow, as for almost 100 years we did not see any female political leader anywhere, including the United Kingdom. It was in 1960 when Sri Lanka elected the first female Prime Minister of his government. Even today, although we have the Lord Speaker, Leader of the House, the Leader of the Opposition, who are all women, we still do not have gender parity in either house. There are only 25% women in this house, and less than 1/3 of members in the other place are women. We have some remarkable women in this house and in the other place, showing what can be achieved. But it is a sorry state of affairs that whilst women make up nearly half of the population, they are underrepresented where decisions that affect their lives and the lives of their families are made. It is this underrepresentation that leads to bad policies and bad law that takes years to unravel the right, the wrong. Statistics for the UK show that gender parity has moved very little in some areas or even stalled completely. We are a long way from anywhere near equality in many areas, whilst trends show that more women than ever are participating in education research shows that this does not directly translate into higher paid work or leadership roles. Women are held back at every stage of their lives by outdated mindsets, entrenched and biased attitudes, and sometimes the sheer practicality of combining work and family life. Since the United Nations was formed in 1947, they have made huge efforts to increase representation of women in politics and all walks of life and empower them. The progress has been slow in spite of the fact that they have championed International Women's Day every year and established the Millennium Development Goals at the turn of the 21st century, which has been declared by the UN as the century of women and girls. 15 years later, with the Millennium Development Goals not fully achieved, one of the gifts in our hands to make even more of a difference and to move things at a greater speed is the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals have been drafted to build on the success of the Millennium Development Goals, whilst ensuring that no one is left behind. But who do we mean when we say that no one should be left behind? Surely, when we look at how gender parity has stalled, we must be thinking of women and girls who are being held back in so many areas of their lives, unable to contribute in any meaningful way to their immediate communities and wider society. At this point, I would like to declare an interest as a long-standing advocate of gender parity, as founder and chairman of the Lumba Foundation, where we are fighting a hard battle to achieve gender parity and empowerment for women and girls, including widows, around the world. I am convinced that empowering women and increasing their representation, both politically and economically, will benefit the world in a big way. There will be less conflict, there will be less violence, and less discrimination against women and girls. Women and girls will become more capable of fending for themselves and participate on equal terms with their male counterparts. In conclusion, I have no doubt that through the Sustainable Development Goals and the United Nations Women's recent campaign, He for She, calling on all men to participate to help women, we can see the potential for huge progress to increase representation and empowerment for women and girls, including widows, in the United Kingdom and around the world by 2030.
My Lords, can I first add my congratulations, although they're not in their places now, to the Right Reverend Prelate and the Noble Baroness Mohn, who really gave two sparkling speeches that not just sparkling, but they were interesting and fascinating, and I did admire them very much. One of the things I wanted to say, and it hasn't been much mentioned, I think Baroness Morris mentioned it, was we hear a lot, us women politicians, about training and mentoring women candidates. And I just want to put it on record that nothing irritates me more than hearing about training and mentoring of women candidates. Because having spent 2 parliaments in the House of Commons, I think actually it is the men and the male candidates that need the training and mentoring. Why do we women think we need training and mentoring, for goodness sake? We are the people who tell children what to do, we tell our partners what to do, we organise our homes, we sort out differences of opinion, we settle squabbles, and someone tells me I've got to have some training and mentoring. No, I'm sorry, my lords, I think it's a nonsense. We have to look for other reasons why more women don't come into politics, which was the sort of initial purpose of this debate. And I refer now to the Noble Lord Cashman, who's not here now, but he mentioned that other phrase that really, really makes me see red. Well, again, red, it's unfair on the Labour Party, really, because they've got more women than anything, but it's the empowerment of women. People talk, we must have the empowerment of women. As if, you know, if women were empowered, everything would be all right. But how can women be empowered here or in developing countries if they don't have power first over their own bodies? And there are hundreds of millions of women all over the world who do not have power over their own bodies. They cannot control the number of children they have, and if you cannot control the number of children you have, you can say goodbye to any sort of career outside the home. So that is why I'm always pushing the need, and thank goodness this government sees the need and is helping provide it, for family planning provision worldwide, good maternal care. And it applies to this country too, because our family planning services aren't what they were. But also we must remember childcare. Because if anything actually stops women doing anything, once again, it's those years that we do have to take out to look after little children unless we can have affordable childcare. And we still have not got there yet. Other European countries are much better off than we are, and I would appeal to the government to remember that. But just briefly, and this is very self-indulgent, I thought just for a change, I think, well, why me? Why am I here now? And why was I in the House of Commons? And why was I a local councillor in Richmond for many years? Why did I do it? I didn't come from a deprived background, I'm afraid. I'm sorry to tell you. I didn't have to struggle. I didn't have to struggle at all. I was the precious daughter in a family of boys, the only daughter, so I was spoilt, they said. My mother, if I ever said, oh, it's not fair, or I can't do it, or, oh, the boys are all right, but not me, she would say, and my father would back her up, quoting Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, I think it's Cassius who said, the fault, dear Brutus, lies not in the stars, but in ourselves that we are underlings. And my mother would shake her finger and say, go and do your homework. Clear off. So what did I do? I had to prove myself somehow, so I thought I'd do medicine. I went off to UCL and did medicine. But that doesn't explain either why I did politics. Why on earth, with a very, very satisfying career in politics, in medicine, did I think of going into politics? Well, the reason has always been quite clear to me, and I was reminded of it this last weekend when I went to an old girls' reunion of my old school. Sorry, boys, those of you who are still here, but I'm going to talk now about my girls' school in the West Midlands, an ordinary girls' grammar school. I've always wanted to put this into Hansard, always wanted to put it in, and now it's my chance. Dudley Girls' High School. Ordinary girls' school. My mother had gone there before me on a scholarship, and I went there on a scholarship. In that school, since the 1920s, we'd had a form of school government. I don't mean a pupils' parliament, I don't mean a talking shop, I mean school government. We weren't allowed to touch the curriculum, but apart from that, we made the school rules. We had a constitution. I know it very well, that constitution, because I rewrote it when I was school secretary, when I was in the sixth form. So we had this government. Every form elected its own president, vice president and secretary, which then represented them at school council. And one period at the end of every Monday, every week, was devoted either to form council or school council. And the great thing about, and yes, our prefects were democratically elected as well, and so was the head girl, deputy head girl, and school secretary. Everything was done properly and democratically. And the great thing was that you could always say to the smallest child, and I remember an 11-year-old in the first form once carrying on about wearing hats out of school, which of course was a rule at the time. And I said, look, all you have to do, get support from someone, second you in your form council. If you can get it through your form council, take them up to school council, get it through school council, and you can change the rule. Do it. And actually, she did it. She did it. Now, that, I think, is putting politics into practice from the very, very lowest level. It proved to me that there was a system whereby we could do things, and a system whereby we could change things. And I bring it up in this house because I've never come across it since. It was certainly none of my children had the privilege of that sort of education at school, to be able to elect everyone that represented them and change rules if they wanted to. And I think it's very sad that schools talk about giving lessons in politics and lessons in civics and having pupil parliaments and having debating societies, but they never prove to children that they can actually change the world if they want to, and that's the way to do it.
This annual debate, as usual, draws men and women to share their views on the role of women. As each year passes, I see more women in elected roles, many of those in leadership positions. I'm happy to see this, not to balance the numbers, but because they are making such a positive contribution. It is also pleasing that the number of women in employment is at record levels. There are always some women who, for various reasons, are unable to share in everyday life. In this country, we have a commitment to support wholeheartedly those in need, so I do feel that compared with the life of our forebears, life is good. There's always more to do, and I am in no way complacent, but we should take the time to mark good progress. On this important day each year, many issues spring to mind, but this year I want to use my time to highlight a few important points relating to domestic violence. Nearly 50 years ago, when I joined the bench as a magistrate, I remember being told by a colleague that cases dealing with violence within a marriage were only domestic matters and were too difficult. I was not only horrified and ashamed, but it opened my eyes to society's attitude. People were not willing to delve into what happened within a marriage behind closed doors, even when it was well known that offences were being committed. This resulted in many women suffering horrific injuries and being trapped in loveless and beleaguered marriages. We will never know exact numbers because instead of seeing these demoralised women as victims of cruelty, society closed its eyes and ears to them, The police took the attitude that you never know what goes on in the privacy of the home, and it would be impossible to prove anyway. Women covered up any ill treatment and pretended to the outside world that nothing had happened. Many felt that it was their fault and they had failed to be a good wife. Those were the days when men were almost always the sole earner and controlled the family income. Women stayed at home with their children. Part-time jobs were rare, and anything a wife earned was added to the husband's income. He paid the tax on it, and then most seemed to think he should have the right to decide on its disposal. Thank goodness, over the years, attitudes have changed completely. Modern sensibilities, which we all enjoy, equality and transparency, ensure all such cases are quite rightly considered as the most serious in the list of violent offences. On International Women's Day, it is not only important to think back to the role of women 50 or 100 years ago, but also to use the opportunity to look ahead. I'm not only delighted, but proud that this government has seen the need to take radical action to eliminate domestic violence, particularly within marriage. No one, man or woman, should have to live with the constant threat of violence from the person with whom they live. This is a government priority. The government has invested a further £10 million into a network of refuges, with long-term funding for these safe houses now secured until 2020. The introduction of the new domestic violence protection orders will help victims through new powers, stopping the offenders from returning home or contacting a victim for 28 days. This cooling off period can assist both parties, giving them time to consider their actions. A new offence of coercive and controlling behaviour has been introduced, for which an offender can be sentenced to a period of up to 5 years imprisonment if they are guilty of an offence that amounts to extreme psychological and emotional abuse, but does not include physical violence. Sadly, in this more enlightened day and age, both men and women can be subjected to persistent torment. So I'm glad that there will be funding of £40 million to support victims to get the help they need, so necessary in finding their way to the right person. This year, I believe we should concentrate on ensuring these measures of domestic violence are fully understood. Those who practice bullying and shameful acts will be punished and exposed as the criminals they are. We should encourage those who suffer to report this cruelty and to get the support they deserve. My lords, if we succeed, we will not only be righting a wrong that has been a stain on our history, but we will be sending a strong message to other countries where abuse of this nature is tolerated.
My lords, 150 years are 3 or 4 generations of women's lives, and we can list with pride the many achievements of women in civic and public life, not only in UK, but also globally. I've refrained myself from referring to anything abroad today, or try not to, and I'm really pleased that Noble Lady Baroness Morris has highlighted many of the achievements that I would have also taken on board in anything I said. Let me add my warmest regards to the Right Reverend Prelate and the Noble Lady Baroness Mohn on their remarkable contributions, and in fact should be very pleased. I was with about 50 to 70 women, I wasn't counting, women entrepreneurs in East End only last week. They're from an organisation called British Bangladesh Chambers of Women Entrepreneurs, and I hope that she will lend them her expertise at some point, and I'm very happy to put them in touch with her. I think they could benefit from your wisdom. Anyhow, my lord, it's a privilege to thank the Noble Lady Baroness Williams and thank her for her commitment to all women. It's always a great privilege to take part in debates with her. I took part in this very debate. I'm taking part in this very debate and reflecting, in fact, on the first ever debate I took part in, a debate secured on International Women's Day in March 1999, when the Noble Lord, Lord Patel, who is not in his place, made his maiden speech. And in fact, there were quite a number of noble lords who shared, and it has always been, these discussions have always been very mixed, and all sides of the House has very readily contributed, and so it's always good to have this discussion. Increasing women's political participation remains a matter of political will and opportunities. When the political leadership decides to act and empower women's entry into Parliament or public position in general, whether by introducing electoral gender quotas, by nominating more women candidates and placing them in favourable positions, by adopting electoral system, it inevitably leads to more candidates being elected to a constituency. Results are evidently evident in increasing women's greater participation, and I know that Noble Lady Baroness Jenkins and others have mentioned that. Opportunity seems to be one of the major barriers for many women, whilst we continue to operate party mechanism control which manipulates who and how our candidates are selected. Many will reject such truths which lay just beneath our consciousness, where prejudice and opportunities interplay and intersect. This was reinforced by what young women said in an event I participated earlier this morning, which was held to celebrate International Women's Day, organised by Canary Wharf Group and the Tower Hamlet Councillor Rubina Khan, on widening participation. Points made earlier by Noble Lady Baroness Jenkins that more men today in the Commons than there have been ever women since women's membership of Parliament has begun does not come as news to even those young people who are clearly much more savvy. One of them said this morning that those who select only do so in their own reflection, whether it is managers of CEO in Canary Wharf or potential MPs, peers and MEPs. Hence, we have the kind of parliament which speaks volume about sexism, racism, Islamophobia and lacking diversity. It is difficult to counter these deeply held opinions. The figures do speak for themselves and not provide much confidence. Since 1866, there is no substantial difference in voting behaviour between men and women. The lack of voter turnout among women is particularly significant, with more than 9.1 million women failing to vote in the last general election in comparison to 8 million men. When I speak to young women, they will often casually mention that there is no one to vote for, suggesting that they cannot and do not relate to the candidates seeking their support. This is very worrying, my lords. The decision by political parties in some countries to field higher number of women candidates or place them in winnable position demonstrate how significant political directions, will and leadership is to bringing about the required positive changes, as my party has unfailingly proved again and again with positive enforcement on women-only shortlists and other initiatives. Post-2015 parliamentary election resulted 191 women MPs, a mere 29%, largely swelling the number due to the Labour Party's consistent commitment to increasing the number of women. Shows once again the quotas and positive actions work in getting more women into Parliament. There are more than enough research available to explain where there is no incentive for party mechanism, the number of women selected and elected remain unacceptably poor. However, BME numbers remain disproportionately low as the numbers of women in general. A recent IPU report also highlighted the need to tackle impediments to women running for office, such as the lack of adequate finance for their campaigns, and reiterates the critical role of political parties in changing the status quo. In a recent discussion with another large group of Muslim women, I heard the same as I had heard back in 2008 to 2010 when I went around the country for the government speaking to BME women, repeated, my lords, that women are ever ready to participate in the democratic structures of our country. Many thousands are helping to shape their communities, if only support is available to them in their battles to overcome prejudice and, of course, sexism. Many also say that politicians do not reflect their class, background, or aspiration. BME women in particular do not share the belief that the corridor of power and office is within their means. When asked how long they thought it would take before the UK had a black woman or among another ethnic minority as Prime Minister, it will not come as a surprise that only small number of 20, small number, around 20%, said about 20 years or 50 years. Some said 50 years. And the majority said there may be 100 years. And large majority of women said, without a doubt, it will never happen. Does it matter if ethnic minority women participate and are included in politics? Does it matter if men in politics, women in general, are part of our political structures? The answer is the same as been given just prior to earlier in this discussion. The last parliament elected 41 MPs, and they were BME backgrounds. 20 of them were women, almost parity. It is a national disgrace that black and ethnic minorities make up only 6% of parliament. It is totally unacceptable given the history of our country that there are so few women of colour in parliament. If Parliament was as reflective as it should be, we would have had 50% women and 13% of BME women peers, MEPs, so forth, genuinely reflecting our societies. In many parts of our world, women's suffragist movements have made massive difference, but gender gaps in most sectors of our society remain stark and fundamentally unequal. The plight of gender parity in the UK must not be isolated from the plight of representation of BME women in achievements. The 1866 petition was made to the House of Commons, arguably for a good period of time, the least diverse institutions. Membership of the whole House remains unrepresentative of the country. House of Lords is no different, although there stand slightly more BME members of the House of Lords at peers, 47 peers. This count only for 6.3% of the total membership of 847 peers, of whom only 17 are women. So even the appointed House itself has been unable to address the gender gap. The visible gender gaps is a significant factor in reinforcing the BME women and girls who are burdened by being both gendered and racialized at the same time, making gender parity even more difficult to achieve. It is also unfortunate to stand here today to discuss the progress of women's representation and empowerment when both houses of Parliament are unable to sustain its own reputation, while deep-rooted inequalities remain permeating throughout so many parts of our institutions. My Lords, it is always a privilege to speak in this annual debate, and I look forward to working together with the Minister and the whole House in its eradication of any restrictive obstacle and dismantle any of the walls of inequality which was so ably kick-started by the earlier suffragist movement here in the UK and globally in the world.
My Lords, it's always a pleasure to take part in what has become an annual debate to celebrate International Women's Day. And we have had an enormous line of progress as regards women, but it also gives us the opportunity to pause and remind ourselves how much further we've got to go. One or two people have said to me, Brenda, isn't it becoming a mechanical thing having this thing every year on the day around the 8th? I don't accept that. It's just one day in the year where we're reminding people just how important this topic is, that we have made progress, and we can celebrate much, but also that we do need to continue working to develop that progress. This year's debate, I think, was made all the more rich by the contribution of the two maiden speeches, the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Gloucester, made a wonderful speech, and it wasn't just for the content, it was with the compassion and the conviction which is so important in this chamber. And I look forward very much indeed to your contributions in the future. I just ask people to reflect, why the dickens did it take us so long? And the noble lady, the Baroness Mohun, your contribution was wonderful, full of energy and vitality. And I just hope that the House has the sense to approach you to take part in the outreach programme, which goes into schools and talks to sixth forms, because you will be such an inspiration to them. But I hope you enjoy your time in the House. My Lords, the scene setting for a debate is always set by the Minister at the dispatch box. And I would like to congratulate the Minister, Baroness Williams, for the way in which you introduced the debate, the breadth of it. You covered so much indeed, including mentioning Manchester, my home city, where a lot of social progress emanated from, not least the suffragettes, but also the Trades Union Congress was founded in Manchester. So a great city with a great history. So thank you very much for mentioning it. During the course of your very interesting presentation, you were the first one to mention the area of violence against women. It's the area I would like to touch on. And it was very interesting to hear the observations of Baroness Seckham. I nearly said my noble friend, because we've known each other for so many years. But her contribution was very important too, in the sense she talked about violence in marriage. I'd like to take a different aspect of it. At the moment, the Armed Forces Bill is going through the House, and normally I'd take part in that because of my interest in defence matters, particularly personnel. But because of being involved in a select committee on another bill going through the House, I wasn't able to, but I have read the debates. And normally in a debate, a minister is asked to answer at the end of it. I don't think many questions have been posed in this debate, so I'd like to pose one. It may be a very difficult one for you, but I'd like the minister, if she's able to respond, and I'd like to try and engineer that the women members, the noble baronesses on the benches opposite, lend support to an issue I'd like to raise. During the debate on the Armed Forces Bill last week in Grand Committee, there was an amendment down to ask that there be a legal requirement to publish allegations of sexual violence in the services. Now, we are talking predominantly about women, but not totally about women. The Army is a reflection of society. And during that discussion, the admirable work that Sir Nick Carter's campaign, Chief of General Staff, started, and about 8 months ago he said, and I quote, and that the Army has an overly sexualised culture in which inappropriate behaviour is deemed acceptable. Now, if anyone knows that, he does, as a Chief of General Staff, but of course anyone that's been close to services knows that as well. And there's been major strides to change it. And the campaign that Sir Nick Carter has been running is welcome and admirable. But unfortunately, there's not the requirement to print the figures about the allegations of rape in the services. I was astonished to read in the debate a statement that some 20 members of the Army are actually registered on the sex register. They're still in the Army. They've been dispersed when those offences were known. 2 years ago, from information that was sought, there were 200 allegations of rape and sexual offences. My Lords, to deal with a problem, we need to know the facts. Now, I know that the noble Lord, the Minister, Lord Howe, said, well, the details will go on the website. But of course, what we need the government itself to actually give the lead. Much more powerful to give by example rather than tell people what to do. And I would ask the noble lady, the Minister replying, if, and I'm not suggesting she can give the answer in full, but this really is an important area. if the government really means what it says, and I don't disbelieve it does, and I certainly believe what the noble Baroness Williams said in opening the debate, if they really believe that and they're going to have initiatives and policies on violence, and I welcome that very much. This is not a party political issue. The issue of International Women's Day and the issues that have been raised, they're not party-pre. They're about women in our society. And the women in our armed forces and the men who are subject to sexual abuse deserve and are entitled to have our support. But that can only be dealt with properly if the facts are there. And could I plead with the Minister to go back and try and persuade her colleagues that to have a legal requirement just simply to publish the figures would actually be great progress. Thank you.
I'm really privileged to speak in this debate today and also congratulate the maiden speeches, the Right Reverend Bishop of Gloucestershire and my noble friend Lady Mohun, who have to say I totally agree that Baroness Morris is a wonderful mentor and a dear friend. I am number 21 in 25 and a lot has been covered, but they are the only statistics I'm going to cover in my speech, so I won't be too long. I would like to start with a quote. As Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "A woman is like a tea bag. You can't tell how strong she is until you put her in hot water." I totally agree. And we know that women are capable of many amazing things. They run businesses, homes, and families. Not only have we had a female Prime Minister in the UK, it is possible that there may be a female President in the United States of America during my lifetime. So there has undoubtedly been progress regarding the empowerment and emancipation of women in the last 150 years. And I would like to congratulate my noble friend, the Minister, for starting this debate, not just because of who she is, but because she's a Mancunian like myself. Nevertheless, what concerns me more is there are still too many women who do not have a voice or have been excluded from much of what is good in our country, simply because they have been a victim of crime, which, my lords, has been covered a lot in the debate today. But I speak as my role as Victims Commissioner for England and Wales, where I've met many women who have been trafficked into this country to work as sexual and domestic slaves. With the dedicated support of the Salvation Army, I was so very humbled to see how some of these women had turned their lives around. Once they realised they could open a door to step out was just truly remarkable, because they had somewhere safe to stay and they were able to walk down that street without being recaptured or beaten. These women threw themselves into education and training that was on offer to them. They wanted nothing more than to earn their own salary, to be safe and to support their own families. My lords, they just wanted to be loved and wanted to be respected. I know that women do not lack skills and abilities, but many lack opportunities. The opportunity to participate or to gain employment, voluntary work, education, or some other goal in life is important to help many victims rebuild their lives after experiencing devastating harm and loss. And I would include myself in this. Following the murder of my late husband Gary in 2007 and the ordeal of watching my 3 young daughters appear as witnesses at their father's trial, I thought I would never be able to get through another day. We had no income and at one point no home and almost no hope. But I had to think about my 3 daughters and their futures as young women. I had to find a way of providing for them financially, and I was so determined they would grow up as happy, healthy young women as their father wanted them to. So as they say, you gain strength and courage and confidence by experience in which you really stop to stare straight in the fear in the face of fear. In October 2010, I became the government champion for safer communities. Antisocial behaviour has 2.3 million victims. It's a horrendous crime, and one that should be respected, and one that should support victims as they go through this in their communities. I was then further honoured to work on a £1 million alcohol fund project to help 20 communities tackle alcohol-fuelled antisocial behaviour successfully. And in 2012, I became the Victims Commissioner for England and Wales. I know I was more fortunate than many other victims of crime. I have the support of my family, friends, and also of strangers. But I also suffered, and sadly still do today, criticism and abuse. If an ordinary woman like me, who is not from a privileged background and who is not of an academic genius, can make a useful contribution to society, just think what other potential is being missed by those women and young girls who don't have such an opportunity. It is one of the saddest parts of my job to see how the skills and abilities of women who have been victims of crime are so often underdeveloped or ignored, or usurped by the crime they have suffered. We know nowadays that many women and men have suffered years of physical, sexual and emotional abuse by those who should have protected them. I have met some of these victims, many who have dropped out of school, entered into abusive relationships, turned to drugs and alcohol, and sadly ended up in prison. They had a complex array of problems, and the services that needed either weren't there for them. Those services couldn't cope with their sometimes challenging behaviour, or simply were only available to them for a relatively short time. We are learning so much about the nature and prevalence of child abuse, and the independent inquiry conducted by Justice Goddard is likely to voice even more. What seems to be lacking, certainly for women that I have met, is a long-term, suitably coordinated package of support. That means with employment, finances and accommodation, as well as to help deal with the psychological, physical and emotional impact of a crime that never even leaves you, but you try to cope the best you can. And unless this support package can be put in place, women may have won the vote, but they will have lost their voice and their opportunity. So whilst I welcome International Women's Day as a chance to celebrate the economic, cultural and political achievement of every woman in the world, I want us to make sure that we do help all women to achieve their potential. So much has been achieved, but we must never allow ourselves to become complacent. Suffrage for women in the UK was achieved a long time ago. Suffering for women who are victims of crime, sadly, my lords, continues.
My lords, I join with other noble lords in thanking the noble lady, the Minister, for securing this debate. As other noble lords have said, we should celebrate the achievements that women have made in the 150 years since the first petition for women's suffrage was presented to Parliament. I also share with my noble friends pride in what my party has achieved, especially things like the first National Childcare Strategy in 1998, but also recognising that so much more needs to be done to increase women's representation at every level in our party, senior staff, officials, local government, and also, I'm sorry to say, in shadow cabinet portfolios. And whilst on this side of the House there is little to celebrate in last year's election result, we do have 99 brilliant women representing Labour in the Commons, after the highest number and percentage of women candidates on record. And because it is International Women's Day, and I share the sentiments of the noble Lady Baroness Northover, I just want to briefly mention two other elections that happened last year. Our sisters in Saudi Arabia did take part in the first municipal council elections in which women were allowed to vote, the first in which they were allowed to run for office, and the first in which they could be elected as politicians. However, instead of being able to participate on an equal basis like we are doing this evening, mandatory sex segregation has been imposed, and those elected women can only contribute by video link from an adjoining room. And in Burma, the National League for Democracy won a resounding victory, but the military still have a veto over constitutional change which will deny Aung San Suu Kyi the opportunity to stand for president. That same constitution also gives the Burmese army impunity for military perpetrators of rape and sexual violence. And I would hope that the Noble Lady, the Minister, would agree that the British government should give support to the Women's League of Burma to help their work in documenting cases of rape and providing support for victims of sexual violence. With gender parity being the theme of this International Women's Day, I turn to the issue of women and apprenticeships. It is right to say that young women appear to be achieving better educational outcomes at all levels, and that women have increasing labour market opportunities. And on the surface, the growth in female apprentices seems to support this trend, as there are now more women than men starting apprenticeships. But behind these figures lies another story. Next Monday, the Young Women's Trust, of which I declare I am a trustee, will launch a report, Making Apprenticeships Work for Young Women, which will show that young women apprentices are missing out on the benefits that apprenticeships can bring. Women apprentices get paid an average of £2,000 less per year, are twice as likely to receive no training, and are almost 3 times more likely to be unemployed at the end of their apprenticeship than their male counterparts. A key reason for these differences is the continued occupational segregation by gender, which persists at apprenticeship level. For example, 94% of childcare apprentices are women, but make up only 4% in engineering. There are 74 men for every woman apprentice in plumbing. But while women's progress in male-dominated sectors has stalled, men are now moving into the more female-dominated sectors. There are 10 times more male apprentices in health and social care than in 2002. Employers need to take a more proactive approach to increasing the representation of women in sectors such as engineering, IT and construction. More needs to be done to make apprenticeships more flexible and to ensure young women can afford to do an apprenticeship by increasing pay and offering support with costs such as travel or childcare. I believe that if the government is to meet its laudable target of 3 million apprenticeships by 2020, urgent action is required. That's why I would propose that the government sets up a review to look at what action needs to be taken to increase diversity in apprenticeships in the public and private sectors. The Davis Review, led by my noble friend Lord Davis of Abersock, into the obstacles facing women becoming directors of listed companies, could be replicated to look into the obstacles facing women getting into apprenticeships and make proposals to improve the position. It should look at the sectors where the number of female apprenticeships is disproportionately low. It could set targets, dare not say the word quotas, and look at different ways of attracting women, especially young women, for example by outreach programmes, and also whether the careers service, as currently provided by schools, is providing the right information on apprenticeships to young girls. Because the Education Select Committee has said that in regard to the careers service, the interests of school and pupils are not aligned, and that trusting schools does not work. Sir Michael Wilshire has described the careers service as a disaster area. It would therefore be important to include the careers service in the review. There is also a fear that the annual progress report that's proposed on the apprenticeship target will just record the numbers passing through the system. If it worked in conjunction with the review, it could look at the quality of the apprenticeships by, for instance, gathering destination data. University education has long been assessed this way and would give parity of esteem. But perhaps not all aspects of the Davis Review should be replicated, in that it would be so much better for a woman to lead it. And would the noble lady of the Minister say whether she thinks that only having 1 woman on the government's apprenticeship delivery board compared to 5 men is also setting a good example of the government's commitment to gender parity? I've listened to many speeches in this House, including the excellent maiden speeches that we've just heard. But among the many I've heard was a speech that my noble friend Baroness Prosser gave, and it's remained with me. I paraphrase, but Baroness Prosser quoted a trade unionist who pointed out that while a lot of attention is given to breaking the glass ceiling, it's important to remember the women, especially young women, who don't feel that they've made it past the skirting board.
Yeah. My Lords, it's been a pleasure for me as well to speak as well and take part in the annual debate, and hearing so many excellent, outstanding contributions from all sides of the House. I'd like to thank the Noble Baroness, the Minister, for securing the debate and for her very comprehensive introduction in setting the scene of where we are today. But I'd also like to join others in congratulating the excellent maiden speeches we heard from the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Gloucester. I hadn't realised actually that we have something in common. We may have grown up in very different religious backgrounds, but I also broke my political teeth really in my community work in Hackney and Islington, and indeed went to school in Hackney and grew up there. I hadn't realised that we were, our paths may have crossed. It was very interesting to hear her life experience and the path, the journey that brought her here. And I look forward to more contributions from the Right Reverend Prelate. And also the excellent and inspirational maiden speech from the Baroness Mohn. Very inspirational and very interesting to hear the background as well. I can't say I share a lot in coming from being a Londoner, but I do share something. I think there's a bit of a theme going on here in the chamber today that I also after school had to work in but it was my parents' grocery shop, which I really resented from about the age of 12, having to stack shelves and sort of help customers with their shopping, and that's I was taught then how one had to work, and work ethic was a very, very important thing. We all had to work very hard. So I look forward to Lady Mohn's future contributions as well. I just wanted to we've heard the theme about Pledge for Parity, and I saw a quote from the World Economic Forum predicting in 2014 that it would take until 2095 to achieve global gender parity. And then a year later, they estimated that in fact has slowed down, and that it would now be, the gender gap wouldn't be closed entirely until 2133. So, we may be making progress, but, my lords, there's still a long way to go, and we can't rest on our laurels. I just want to touch on domestic violence as well, that we've done a lot in this country and we've come a long way, and other noble lords have touched on this as well. Baroness Seacombe, Baroness Dean and others have touched on this. I declare an interest as I'm a member of the Select Committee on Sexual Violence in Conflict, which is a much wider issue. It's a really serious issue globally. But it all comes back to status of women. From the report, our report will be presented to your Lordship's House very soon. But there was a common theme running through it. And until the status of women is further enhanced and accelerated, violence will always continue and be used as a tool to keep women in their place. Sadly, I mean, it's much worse in globally that we heard some appalling evidence how women's status was a direct result of a lot of the violence that they're facing. But also, my lords, I feel that we need to, in this country, we're leaders in this field. We've done so much internationally, but we also need to lead by example. And women in detention, which was touched on by Baroness Horston and others, we still need to lead. So every year, 2,000 women who are seeking asylum in the UK are locked up. Most of them are in the Islewood Detention Centre. Many are there indefinitely, only to be released later on into the community. And for women who have fled rape, trafficking, imprisonment and torture, detention can be an absolutely devastating way to be treated, and many self-harm or attempt suicide. My lords, I really do think we need to get a grip on this Islewood situation and shut it down, frankly. It's a disgrace, and I think we can do much better. It's not a good example for us to be setting globally when we are trying to fight violence against women globally. And Lord Cashman talked about refugee women as well, and the double disadvantages that they often face in looking after their children and fleeing violence as well. My noble friend Baroness Northover referred to the SDGs, the importance of that, that the government analyse the impact of these goals in the UK, and domestically how we need to look at things that would make life better for women, the shared parental leave, care costs, all these things that makes women's lives easier and able for women to participate, particularly in Parliament and in public life. And I pay tribute also to the Baroness Jenkins of Kennington for the work that she's done in her own party, the groundbreaking work that she's done, and the affirmative action that she supports in bringing greater representation in her own party. which many in my own party share and aspire to do as well as she has done. I'd also like to pay tribute to Lord Fowler for the work he's done on HIV as well, AIDS as well. And I was privileged to be on the committee that he chaired some years ago, looking into this more in more depth. And he reminded us of the plight of women across the world, still discriminated because of the virus that they have. And also for my noble friend Baroness Barker, she highlighted LGBT women's health, which is a much neglected area that we need to really start focusing a bit more on. Baroness Morris of Bolton, I was really pleased that she raised this issue about Muslim women, particularly in the Middle East, the challenges that they have. And I think just to bring it back to the present day, women in this country who are from a migrant or immigrant background, particularly those who are Muslim women as well, are now under increasing spotlight to do far more. And it's you know, there's a lot of Islamophobia, we know that, but on top of that, they are being held responsible for radicalisation as well. So they are under the spotlight more than ever, and many are facing disadvantage within their own communities, and it's unfair that they're being put under the spotlight in this way as well. They need far more support. My noble friend Lord Lumber, as ever, brought his international expertise to this debate and paid tribute to all the work he's done and the way his work and his foundation has touched so many women around the world. And Baroness Tom, yes, training and mentoring, I absolutely agree. That's one thing that is a red rag to pull for me. Whenever I hear that women need mentoring and training, of course women do, but so do men. And it's unfair to think that women are somehow lacking in participating unless they're given training on all aspects of public life. So I totally agree with her on that. And of course we need more ethnic minority women, as Baroness Udin said, as well, to better represent the society in which we live in. My Lords, I just wanted to just highlight really that one of the things that if we had more active participation of women at every level, both in this country and around the world, it would strengthen the women's movement, it would make lives better, it would lead to stronger communities, healthier societies, because women are at the forefront in all aspects of these issues. So I just end with this. I was very moved by what Baroness Dearlove had said about women's voice and women having a voice. All too often we complain that women at peace conferences, at different summits, high-level summits, their women's voices are not heard. They're usually there. Now we're being told they're there, but they're never there participating equally as with the men, and they should be there. We should make sure that we lead on that and insisting that women's voices are heard. And I just end on this note, which struck me, my Lords. A woman has a voice. Women with a voice is by definition a strong woman. And we need to make sure that more women have a voice and are listened to.
My Lords, I think this has been a great debate this evening, celebrating International Women's Day, and I really would like to thank Baroness Williams, the Minister, for bringing this debate before us today. And as others have said, it's like an annual event where we can take an audit of where we are as far as women's equality is concerned. It's been so good to have our two excellent maiden speeches, and these maiden speeches made me think back to the case of Viscountess Rhondda. Now, she inherited her title from her father, Viscount Rhondda, and she was the only child and was given special permission to inherit her title. Now, she wanted to take her seat in the House of Lords, but she was denied this opportunity following a famous test case before the Lords Committee of Privileges in 1922. Now, Viscountess Rhondda, she was a suffragette, she was a feminist, a magazine owner, a successful businesswoman, and the first and only female president of the Institute of Directors, but still not allowed to take her seat in the Lords because she was a woman. Well, maybe she was, but she did go to the right in the end, didn't she? If you know her full story.
So, my lords, 32 years later, on November the 4th, 1958, history was made when the Baroness Elliot of Harwood became the first woman peer to speak in the House of Lords, as the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Gloucester, mentioned in her maiden speech. And I raise this because when she made her maiden speech, she said she was very conscious that except for Her Majesty the Queen opening Parliament, it was probably the first occasion in 900 years that the voice of a woman had been heard in the deliberations of this House. So how appropriate tonight, 58 years after the first woman appeared to speak in your Lordship's House, we witness another historic event. As this is the first time we've heard the voice of a woman speaking from the Bishop's benches, and I congratulate the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Gloucester, for making her maiden speech and making history tonight. And, you know, it's a privilege to be here and to participate in such a great occasion and to listen to what you had to say. And we're looking forward to many more contributions from the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Gloucester. And of course, our other maiden speech tonight was from the Baroness Morn, and how interesting her speech was to the House. Her experience in building up her own business from her start at 15 or 10 years of age, I believe, when she started her first business, and making such a success. And I believe she's a great role model, showing what a determined woman can achieve. And I look forward to hearing further contributions from the noble Baroness. And she's very much, I think, like the Viscountess Rhondda, because she was a very successful businesswoman, when very few women at that time were in the business world. So I think there's something in common there between the Viscountess Rhondda and the noble Baroness. So, my lords, while we celebrate International Women's Day, the United Nations has designated the theme for 2016 as Planet 50-50 by 2030, a step up for gender equality. I think that's a great theme to have, and so appropriate at a time when much more action is required to bring about equality for women. So can this be achieved? Can we have Planet 50-50 by 2030? I wonder. Now, I believe we can. If the will and determination is there, it can be achieved. So, my lords, if we look around our elected institutions, we see that women are in the minority. In the House of Commons, there are now 191 women MPs, the highest number ever. Now, I'm proud to say that 99 of them are Labour women. And, you know, to get 99 women from one party, although in 1997 we had 101 women, but we had a lot more women, a lot more MPs in 1997 than we've got at the moment. So percentage-wise, it makes up 43% of the Labour group. So we've got 99 Labour women, there's 68 Conservatives, and, you know, we know that's a big increase as far as Conservative women are concerned, and I know that Lady Jenkin and Lady Morris have played a big part in making sure that happened. And there were 20 Scottish nationalist women MPs. Now, at the last election, there were 1,033 women candidates, the largest number ever, making up 26% of all candidates. That does show that there's no shortage of women wanting to stand for Parliament. If in 2015, 1,033 women wanted to become MPs, so there's no shortage around. But considering that women have been able to stand for Parliament since 1918, it's not really a very good story. Now, on one day in May last year, 459 men were elected to the House of Commons. Now, that's 9 more than the 450 women ever elected since 1918. So it's taken 97 years to get 450 women MPs. Only 39 women have ever been in the cabinet, and only one woman have ever been Prime Minister. And again, I pay tribute to the Conservative Party for electing the first and only woman leader so far and becoming Prime Minister. So, my lords, but if we look at the new institutions of the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Assembly, we see women have fared much better. In 2003, Wales became the world leader as the first democratically elected institution to have 50% women, although people have mentioned tonight that that hasn't been achieved. It was achieved in Wales. And not long after that, because of a by-election, there were 31 women and 29 men. So we are making progress, I think, in the new institutions. And we see that, as far as my own party was concerned, we fielded an equal number of men and women in 1999 at the first elections, and that made a huge difference, but it wasn't easy. It's never easy when you're trying to make a breakthrough for women. It is a very hard battle within my own party, but we did achieve it. So we see that, even despite that, we see that in political and public life, generally women are in the minority. We know that women in the workplace earn less than men. The pay gap has taken a long time to close, despite having the Equal Pay Act since 1970. And how can there be equality when the level of domestic abuse is so high, as many noble lords have mentioned tonight? Now, the Office of National Statistics, in their 2014 report, estimated that 1.4 million women suffer domestic abuse, and 2 women are killed every week by a current or former partner in England and Wales. Approximately 85,000 women are raped each year. Now, this is a very high level of violence against women. There are laws to protect women, and many police forces deal with domestic abuse in a much better way than previously, owing to better understanding and training. The law will now bring perpetrators to justice in many cases. This is all to the good. But how to change the culture of our society that allows such violence is yet to be resolved. So, my lords, is progress being made for women? And how can this be achieved by 2030? And can the UN pledge for parity be achieved? And should we have more laws that could change the culture? We can look at the laws that we brought in the Election of Candidates Act 2002, which allowed all women shortlists for political parties who wish to use them. And that has helped to deal with the underrepresentation of women. My lords, we see very few women at the top table in the business world. In recent years, this has been recognised, and there has been much more effort made to get women on boards. As my noble friend Lord Davies of Abersoch has produced his report on behalf of the government on gender diversity in the boardrooms and showing there has been an increase, and it's now up to 26.1. And he made a number of recommendations to improve the gender balance by 2020. So intervention can work, and it can be followed in line with Lord Davies' recommendations. So, my lords, I can see that the time is going on, and I will come now to a close, because I'm getting some looks here, and thank you for the hint. So, can I just end with this one thing then? Would the ministers agree to join with me and take the pledge for parity in order to achieve the UN objectives of Planet 50-50 by 2030, a step up for gender equality? And could we start in our Lordship's house? We could work together to make our Lordship's house a gender-balanced house and a more woman-friendly place. And we could do this by asking all the party leaders to ensure that all new lists of peers could be 50-50. You know, that could be, we could certainly have discussions on that, and that each party leader could commit to that. Other things we could do is to ensure that all legislation is written in a non-sexist language instead of the present always in the male gender. There are many things we could do. We could make a start in our own house. I think if we work together on that, and if we accept the challenge from the United Nations, I believe that could be done, and I look forward to the Minister's response to that invitation that I'm handing out to her tonight.
My Lords, the debates for International Women's Day are always outstanding, and this has been no exception. It has been a privilege to listen to a debate that has, as usual, encapsulated a huge range of topics and themes. And may I also particularly congratulate the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Gloucester, and my noble friend Baroness Mohn for their excellent maiden speeches. They both highlighted the wealth of experience that women in your Lordship's house bring to our debates. Their personal experiences were inspiring, and like other noble lords, I look forward to their future contributions. And I would also like to thank our 5 male contributors this evening. A quick little bit of maths to show women can do it. I make them up 20% of speakers this evening, perhaps something of a role reversal for many of them in your Lordship's house. And my Lords, while there has been an upbeat tone to many contributions, I think it's also fair to say that noble Lords have acknowledged that inequalities still persist. As we've heard, women are less likely to be in the House of Commons or the House of Lords, although I believe when I entered the House not long ago, there were more female entries in my group than men, so I was pleased with that. But women are less likely to be on boards, at the top of companies, in our Supreme Court, among our judges and as editors of newspapers. Progress has been made, as today our daughters and granddaughters live in a world that is fairer and more equal, a world where more doors are open to them than ever before, but sometimes progress has seemed slow. The challenge for us is to overcome the barriers that still exist to ensure that all women and girls have the opportunity to meet their full potential. It will be impossible to provide a response that will do justice to all the contributions we've heard today, but I will try and cover most of the themes that noble lords have raised. We are committed to continuously improving the public appointments process and have set the aspiration that 50% of new appointments should go to women. In 2014-15, women made up 42% of public appointments and reappointments, up from 39% last year, and it's the highest figure since the data began in 2010. Although we still have a long way to go, as highlighted by the noble Lady Baroness Uden and the noble Lord Lumber, this is the most gender-diverse Parliament in British history. We now have more female MPs than ever before, and a third of our cabinet is made up of women. Women now make up just under a third of MPs, a significant increase of 23% since 2010. And as we've heard, it is thanks to the work of members of this House, my noble friends Baroness Jenkin, Baroness Morris, and the noble Lady Gale, to name but a few, who have helped to make sure we've had the progress we have. And it's great to see not just more female MPs, but an increase of those from minority backgrounds, such as Cabinet Minister Priti Patel. As a country, we cannot afford to waste the talents of half our population, and that is why we must continue to ensure women are better represented across all walks of life. And traditional stereotypes don't just hold back our young people, they can hold back women aiming to achieve leading roles in UK business. But again, we are beginning to see progress. As the noble Lady Baroness Northover highlighted, the percentage of women on FTSE 100 boards has climbed steadily since the publication of Lord Davies' report in 2011, and women now account for around 26% of directors in the FTSE 100. There are no all-male boards anymore in the FTSE 100, and all-male boards in the FTSE 250 is now down to 17, but we need to make sure that figure decreases to 0. This government supports the business-led 33% target for FTSE 350 boards by 2020, recommended by Lord Davis. If business maintains its momentum, this target can be achieved, and we will support their efforts to do so. It's not only in the corporate world that women are making progress. There are now more women-led businesses than ever before, and indeed we heard the story of one of them, our noble friend Baroness Mohn, this evening. 20% of small and medium-sized enterprises are either run by women or by a team that was over 50% female, an increase of 140,000 since 2010. and these women contribute around £85 billion to the UK economy. Many women want to start their own businesses, but need the right support to get it started. Natasha graduated in 2010 with a degree in psychotherapy. She was signing on at her job centre when her advisor told her about the new enterprise allowance. Natasha said, "I already had the idea of setting up a counselling business even before I graduated. I'd seen a survey that highlighted the need for more independent counselling services in primary care, but I needed help to make my dreams a reality." NEA provider Ixon took over, giving Natasha support in the early stages of setting up her business. She was given one-to-one advice from a business mentor, a £1,000 government loan to finance the rent premises and a laptop. Emma from London started her business Silkthread with the help of a £10,000 start-up loan and raised a further £180,000 via crowdfunding. Her online business now provides designers with the tools and resources to independently retail their collections and grow their businesses, connecting designers with online shoppers. And as a government, we are committed to working to ensure that female entrepreneurs do get the support and encouragement they need. In the wider areas of work and employment, we're also addressing the issues that we know are most pertinent to women. From the introduction of the right to request flexible working, to the extension of childcare offer, as mentioned by the Noble Lady Baroness Tong, to shared parental leave, we're helping women to achieve a better balance between work and motherhood. Britain's flexible working schemes are vital to a modern, flourishing economy and have contributed to a record number of women in employment. Female employment has increased faster in the UK than in any other G7 country, and the female participation rate has increased by more since 2010 than during the 3 previous parliaments combined. Women play a vital role in our economy as both workers and consumers. Our important public services are powered by women. There are more women teachers than men who inspire our children, and if you need youth health services, women will play a key role in looking after you and members of your family. The Noble Baroness Barker, and the Noble Lord Kaka both raised important issues about women's health needs and the users of health services. Reducing health inequalities is central to our work, and we want everybody to have the opportunity to have long and healthy lives. We have, for instance, introduced legal duties to make sure health inequalities are taken into account when planning services, and health inequalities are also considered in local activity to improve local health. The NHS will receive £10 billion more in real terms by 2020-21 than in 2014-15, and we've introduced transparent measures to reduce inequalities in life expectancy in the Public Health Outcomes Framework and the NHS Framework. As a number of Noble Lords referred to, there is a continuing gender pay gap, which we must continue to tackle. As my noble friend Baroness Williams said, the latest ONS statistics show that the gap remains at 19.2%. This is too large, which is why the Prime Minister has set out this government's ambition to eliminate the gender pay gap in a generation. The government has recently published draft regulations which will increase transparency around the gender pay gap, and we expect employers to start publishing the required information from April 2017. We will provide a £500,000 package of support to help businesses calculate, understand and address their gender pay gaps. Government is also looking at ways to help tackle the challenges facing older women in work. We're committed to unlocking the skills, talents and experience of all women and supporting them to meet their full economic potential. The Women's Business Council has established a working group on older workers, and will consider what business can do to support older workers, particularly around the greater use of flexible working, and provide practical support. We're also taking a collaborative approach to addressing the menopause, one of the last taboo subjects. We will be raising awareness and improving understanding through an expert group and new research with the aim of improving workplace equality for women experiencing the menopause. The Noble Lady Baroness Drake raised the important issue of pensions. We think that women will benefit from the government's pension reforms. Over 3 million women will receive an average of £11 more per week by 2030, helping to address some of the points that the Noble Baroness raised. And the new state pension will start at £155.60 per week. My Lords, going from older women now to girls. As we've heard, girls are outperforming boys at school, but too many feel that their career options are limited because of stereotypes about jobs being more suitable for girls or others being more suitable for boys. By investing in education, expanding our apprenticeship programme and improving careers advice, we can help young women to open their eyes to opportunities that they may have believed were unattainable. We have a programme of work to raise girls' aspirations, especially encouraging them to study STEM subjects and pursue careers in science and engineering, an issue so well highlighted by the Noble Lord, Lord Patel. Again, we are making progress. Compared to 2010, the provisional 2015 results show that the number of girls taking Maths A-level has increased by 13% and those taking Physics A-level has increased by 16% since 2010. But as the Noble Lord said, there is still much to do, which is why this is a personal priority of the current Secretary of State for Education and why the government is funding a number of programmes to help encourage more girls continue to take up physics and maths. I also agree with the Noble Baroness 9, her comments that we need to encourage more women into engineering and STEM-based apprenticeships. And this is, again, a focus for the government. And indeed, it is our ambition for at least 20% of new entrants to engineering and technical apprenticeships to be women by 2020. The government is working not just to ensure women are empowered economically, but we're also working hard both internationally and at home to keep women safe. By protecting women and girls from violence and supporting victims is a key priority for this government, as set out by my noble friend Baroness Seckham. Domestic violence occurs across all groups in society, regardless of age, gender, race, religion, sexuality, wealth or geography. The majority of victims are women and children, and research has shown that approximately 1 in 4 women have or currently experience domestic violence. Shockingly, my lords, 1.4 million women were victims of domestic violence in 2014, and it is estimated that between 60 and 85,000 women are raped every year. The cost of the economy has been estimated at $15.7 billion annually, so it is absolutely essential that the safety of women is a priority. The effects of domestic violence, as we've heard this evening, are wide-ranging and differ for all victims. In some cases, the impact is fatal. Leaving an abusive relationship is a long and extremely difficult process. The society has a responsibility to support women who make the very difficult decision to leave. All agencies can play a role in providing support during a women and children's help-seeking process. An initial positive response is crucial. Women and children need to be believed, supported and encouraged to take positive steps for their own safety and well-being. This government has ensured that criminal and civil law offers important protections for individuals who are experiencing domestic violence. In 2010, the coalition government published a cross-government strategy, a call to end violence against women and girls, and in March 2015, we published a report detailing progress in tackling this over the last Parliament. The achievements included providing better protection for victims, such as rolling out domestic violence protection orders and the domestic violence disclosure scheme nationally, and strengthening the law, such as criminalising forced marriage and introducing new civil orders to manage sex offenders. We're currently developing a refreshed violence against women and girls strategy, which will set out a comprehensive plan of action covering prevention, provision of appropriate services, partnerships to ensure improved multi-agency working, and pursuing perpetrators through the criminal justice system. The Noble Lady Baroness Causton specifically raised the issue of the needs of women offenders, and we have just awarded a £200,000 grant funding to support 4 local area pilots which aim to bring together services to support women offenders. The Noble Lady also raised the closure of HMP Holloway. We believe this will enable investment in a high-quality modern prison estate, and we want to ensure that all women's prisons are now resettlement prisons, and with a focus on close ties with families and rehabilitation back into the community. The Noble Lady Baroness Healy raised the important issue of women and homelessness. The government is committed to tackling this issue and has increased investment in homelessness programmes to $139 million over the spending review period. We've protected homelessness prevention funding for local authorities, totalling £315 million by 2019-20, and we are looking at other options, including whether we need legislation to further prevent homelessness. We need to ensure that what we do is inclusive to all groups, whatever their religion, race and background. BME women are disproportionately impacted by specific forms of violence against women and girls, such as forced marriage and honour-based violence. Data released by the police in July 2015 shows that over 11,000 honour crimes were recorded between 2010 and 15. NHS data released in December revealed 1,385 newly identified cases of FGM within the NHS between July and September 2015. In 2014, the Forced Marriage Unit gave advice or support related to a possible forced marriage in 1,267 cases. Being from a migrant BME background may also mean people haven't secured legal status in this country and are dependent on others, particularly the perpetrator, for their stay in the UK. This can mean they lack knowledge about UK systems and laws, which adds to the abuser's control over them. Victims are enslaved in their own homes as a result of an inability to voice their experiences. They don't always speak English and are not allowed to make friends. But the young generation are leading a fight back, with inspirational women such as the Nobel Prize-winning activist Malala Yousafzai helping to highlight the problems faced by young BME people from all over the world. But the Noble Ladies Baroness Northover and Hussein Etchi asked about the Sustainable Development Goals. The government is taking a coordinated approach to these. Last July, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury and the Chancellor to the Duchy of Lancaster wrote to departments asking them how they would implement the new goals. The Minister for Women and Equalities will have a strong interest in ensuring implementation. We're still in the process of confirming the key indicators, but the Office of National Statistics has been leading the government's efforts to ensure the new goals are supported by high-quality data and meaningful statistics. These will make sure data is gender disaggregated to track progress adequately. The Noble Lord, Lord Lumba, raised important issue of educating the fact that educating women can help reduce conflict, and we certainly believe promoting women's participation in peace processes is vital. We're increasing our financial support for women, peace and security activities through the new Conflict Stability and Security Fund. In terms of education, the Noble Lord is absolutely right. We are increasing educational opportunities for girls through the Girls' Education Fund in Somalia, for instance. This provides scholarships for vulnerable and marginalised girls, and by March 2015, this reached 26,000 girls through school enrolment, fee waivers and uniforms, and we are supporting similar programmes in Burma too. Finally, the Noble Lady Baroness Dean asked about sexual violence in the army and the possible publishing of statistics. I know that General Sir Nick Carter is committed to changing the culture of the armed forces and additionally wants to increase the numbers of women. I'm very happy to raise the issues that she discussed with relevant colleagues in the Ministry of Defence. My Lords, this has been a wide-ranging and informative debate and has been as constructive and thought-provoking as ever. Women's representation and empowerment is important, as a report by the Women's Business Council published last year estimated raising the level of women's employment to the same as men's could lift GDP by 10% by 2030, and boosting female entrepreneurship could deliver approximately £60 billion extra to the UK economy. This has been a great opportunity to celebrate the important contribution women make to our society and economy, and to highlight that further work still needs to be done. I hope I've made clear to Noble Lords the Government's determination to do everything in our power to support and transform the opportunities available to women and girls. And thank you very much to all Noble Lords who have contributed today, and I think it shows that we are all committed to the same goal, to work towards full empowerment and fair representation to all women.